It's 6 o'clock. Mr. Geeves, are we ready?
Yes, sir. The meeting is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, then I will call the meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Township Board of Meridian Township on October 20. And we'll start out by doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the
of the
United
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
States.
Thank you, everyone. And now we will do a roll call. Is our clerk ready to do that, please? Clerk Dreyfus? He seems to not be at his desk, and I don't necessarily want to go through the process of appointment. There he is. Time for the roll call, Clerk Dreyfus. And you're muted.
Supervisor Stika.
I'm here.
Clerk Dreyfus is present. Treasurer DeShane.
Here.
Trustee Jackson.
She will be absent today. She is out of town.
Trustee Jackson is absent. Trustee Opsimer. Are you Trustee Opsimer?
Yeah, here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Thank you. Trustee Sunland.
Here.
Trustee Wazinski.
She's in. She's just struggling to get in. She just raised her hand trying to get in.
Okay. 6 members are present.
Thank you very much. We have some presentations, and first one I want to mention is the Okemos boys tennis team, state champs, 3rd time out of 4 years, and this time it's Division I. Holy cow! And I believe the coach is here as well as team members, and we'll call on the coach, who's Chris Silker. Chris, are you there? You want to speak to us, please, about the team?
We're promoting him to panelist right now, sir.
Okay. The problems with Zoom. I see him on my screen, at least by name.
There we go. Now I've been unmuted.
There you go.
Thank you all for the recognition and for inviting us here this evening. We're very honored to be present. Unfortunately, not everyone is able to make it, but we do have with us Senior Captain Siddharth Nagasetti. I don't know if it would be possible to allow him to speak for a brief moment.
Oh, it will. Go ahead and introduce the team members that are here, though, and then mention the ones who are missing.
So I'm on my phone, so I can't quite see the full roll call, but we do have Siddharth Nagasetti here. And then it looks like we have
Rohan Shah,
Shrey Patel, Dhruv Talluri, Joshua Portnoy, Ryan Lee are all present. So therefore missing, we have George Fan, Colston Wells, Abi Shakul, Diego Casagrande, Yunho Cho, and Ben Wei. Oh,
great group of young people.
George. So the whole team is present. Thank you.
We have a history of here in Meridian of honoring whether they're from Hazlet or Okemos state champions, and it's great. We've honored this team, well, some of these members before, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and we're pleased to honor them again. Would you like to say some more, Mr. Silker, and then call on your captain?
Well, we were very happy to be able to have a season. It was, as I'm sure you're aware, touch and go at the beginning. We were very excited to have a safe and successful experience as a team. We're very grateful for the opportunity and very mindful that so many young people did not have that opportunity in the spring or again this fall. So we're just thankful that we were able to have a great season, and we thank you for the recognition. If we could, there are 4 senior captains. We have Siddharth Nagasetti, Dhruv Talluri, Shrey Patel, and Rohan Shah. If possible, I'd love for each of them to be able to say a brief word, and thank you again.
Sure. Which one wants to start? Just kind of raise your hand in front of you and I'll call on you and unmute yourself. Okay, Siddharth. Can you find the unmute button?
There, yeah, I got it. Hello, everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the supervisor and the Meridian Township Board for honoring us today. This season has been phenomenal, especially for us seniors. Like Coach Slicker said, we were unsure of the season this year. So to get through all of that was just, you know, we were just grateful to play this year. And then once we had the opportunity, we really stayed focused and worked hard throughout the season, and went into the state championships confident. So I'm glad we got the job done.
Great. Who else would like to speak? Rohan, unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, I'd like to thank you all of you for honoring us. I know we're all really appreciative of you guys for doing it. First of all, I mean, we had a really strong team coming in this year, and with like 8 seniors, we had a lot of talent, and we had new talent too coming in, and it was a really, really awesome year this year, and we're really thankful for everything our coach has done, being this his last year, and it's really awesome going off with the state title.
Other captains or speakers? Shrey.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you for having us. And this entire season, we worked really hard and reached our goal. That was to win states, and sending off coach with the state title meant a lot. So.
Hey, anyone else? Yes, Drew.
Yeah, so just like Dale said, we're really thankful for you guys for holding this for us. And, you know, this year was a really crazy year. So we're just really happy that we could send our coach off with his third state title. And so, yeah, it was a great way to end his great career for him. So I'm really proud of our guys. And so, yeah.
And I noticed that although he may not be a senior captain, Josh came prepared with his tennis racket, and it looks like there's other players with him as well. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, we're in the middle of our group lesson, and we came out and on the Zoom.
Very good, thank you, Coach. It's your last year. Why are you leaving? You're so successful.
It's been a real honor and an absolute pleasure working with these young men. It's been 11 seasons. I am also blessed with 3 young children and a burgeoning real estate career that requires more focus and time than I can afford to split. Also, the seniors that I have this year, I've been close with for a very, very long time, and it just feels like the right time to call it a year with them and their time at Okemos High School, and let somebody else have their turn running the reins of a program at Okemos. It's a lot of fun to be a part of.
I'm sure you're leaving some excellent talent behind for the new coach, whoever that ends up being.
There are always horses in the stable at Okemos, for sure.
Yeah, back in my many years as a school board member, it was more than once that we honored the tennis team for state championships. So it's a great tradition in Okemos. Thank you.
It certainly is. Thank you very much.
Did a great job. Thank you. Thank you, Coach. Okay, we will now move on to our next presentation, which I believe is going to come from Environmental Commission, or concern the Environmental Commission.
Supervisor Steica, we had hoped to have Leroy Harvey here to make this presentation, and the Trustee Wazinski and I were part of the special tree effort that went into planting 20 large trees along Chippewa Middle School. And if we could put this presentation off for another meeting, I think we'll have a better presentation, and it would be much better led by Mr. Harvey.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that I couldn't make it this time, but we certainly can put it on the agenda for next time as well. All right, thank you. We now come to citizens addressing agenda and non-agenda items. And Mr. Geeves, I'll call upon you to let us know whether we have citizens and whether or not they're ready to be called upon.
Of course, anyone that's participating via Zoom can use the raise hand feature, and I see we have people already doing that. I will call on you in order that you raised your hand. We also have the ability to take, if you're participating via either Home TV Channel 21 or one of the other internet streams that we're doing, we can take public comment via telephone. If you can't use the Zoom interface, the telephone number to do that is 517-349-1232, and we'll pause for the supervisor to remind people the rules for public comment, and I'll start preparing to promote people to speak.
Okay.
The first person for public comment is going to be the Lewis family.
Okay, and I will remind people, you have 3 minutes. It will be timed, and please address the board as a whole, not individuals. Keep it as on topic as possible and as complete as possible. And with that, we will call on, and start out with your name and address, please. So we'll call on the Lewis family then.
Good evening. My name is Robin Lewis, and I reside at 2295 Barnesbury Road, East Lansing, Michigan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. It's with honor that I introduce myself as the potential representative for Meridian Township to the CATA Board of Directors. I would like to thank those of you that urged me to pursue this opportunity, and grateful for the time to apprise those of you that might not be as familiar of my desire and credentials as others. I've been a Michigander for the past 33 years, the entire time as a resident of Ingham County. I've lived in Lansing until a year and a half ago prior to moving to Meridian Township. I worked for over 25 years in public health and have a passion to serve others. I've been fortunate to represent the community as an elected official and have served numerous boards and commissions for the city of Lansing, Ingham County, and the state of Michigan. Since I've moved to Meridian Township, my zeal to continue to serve the community for which I reside has remained. The knowledge that I will bring to the table from my years as a public servant will be to advocate for those that rely on safe, reliable public transportation for day-to-day services. I will be able to be successful at this task because I will listen, be prepared, and remain dedicated to those that I serve, and be sure that everyone is heard and attended to. Thanks again for the opportunity to share with you my desire to serve this wonderful community in this capacity.
Thank you very much. We have another citizen. Geeves?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I was taking a telephone call. The next public speaker is going to be Mr. McConnell, who's been enabled to speak at this time.
Please state your name and address, and then your comments. Mr. McConnell?
There we go.
There you
I'm
go.
trying to
There, Bill.
unmute. Did that work?
You're fine, Bill.
Oh, thank you. This is Bill McConnell, 4376 Manitou in Okemos. I have a couple of questions about the upcoming elections, and I'm looking forward to hearing some detail in the clerk's report later on in the meeting. When I dropped off my ballot yesterday, my absentee ballot yesterday, I noticed a number of people in the township hall room observing the procedures, and I'd be interested in knowing more about what that is and how it's working and how it's proceeding. Also, on a couple of occasions, once in the primary and once in the general election, it's come to my attention that the outdoor drop box at the curb had been overfull. So I'm just hoping for more information about how the elections are proceeding here in the township. I think we all want to have reassurance that everything is well in hand. Thank you.
Thank you. As I did not mention earlier, but as I'm sure Bill knows, and the rest of you who are going to speak should know, We don't dialogue during the time of public comment. If the clerk chooses, he may respond later on at an appropriate time in the meeting. Next person, please, Mr. Geeves.
Next, we're going to have Odie Nordkin, who will be followed by a dial-in caller.
Mr. Norkin, start with your name and address, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor and members of the board. My name is Odie Norkin. I reside at 3803 Sandalwood Drive in the city of Okemos. And I'd like to dedicate my 3 minutes today to urge the board to reconsider the motion not to reappoint Donna Rose to the CATA Board of Directors. Donna Rose is an extremely well-qualified board member at CATA, a social worker professionally who not only uses CATA, but does so daily. For the past 15 years, I've been fortunate to be part of the management team of a successful public bus company, where I learned firsthand that the key to our success encompasses listening to our riders and in customers in general, but far more important, to those who actually get on the bus and ride with us for a long 2-hour ride. In almost every case where an actual bus rider provides feedback, often a critique, we make a decision to improve the operation and mitigate a future recurrence. I know for a fact that many transit riders who depend daily on transit services are often too worried about raising a complaint on any matter due to a concern for the concern of retribution from a company that they so depend on every single day. Donna Rose, as a board member, is not afraid to speak up and provides CATA management and the board with critical feedback. This feedback, both complimentary as well as critiquing information, has accomplished improving the service for everyone. Donna's voice should not be silenced. I fear that what's behind this is an unfortunate decision to silence a voice of dissent. Even though this one critical voice is the best
Please
tool,
wrap it up, Mr. Norkin. You're at 3 minutes.
okay, is the best tool to improve the community bus service. Not reappointing Donna is a mistake, an outright flawed business decision by the board from every aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
Our next speaker is calling in. Ma'am, could you please state your name and address for the public record?
This is Donna Rose. I am at 6207 Cobblers Drive, and I'm calling in today. I am your current board of CATA board member. I've been a very responsible member. I've only missed 3 meetings in 4 months. I'm sorry, 4 months, 4 years. I've only missed 3 meetings in 4 years. You have to forgive me. I'm just getting over what I think is COVID, so I'm not up to par, really. I want to speak tonight about the fact that I'm being dismissed as a board member. I do not know why I'm being dismissed, and nobody has given me a reason. It is crucial to have people with disabilities on boards and commissions such as the CATA Board of Directors, because our public transit for us is a necessity, and we have to use it out of necessity, and we need to be at the table in order to speak about the things that we need as people with disabilities. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of things that I've helped change while being on the board. The first thing I brought to mind, and I can't say too much in 3 minutes, but people with disabilities make up a large percentage of ridership. And one of the things that was happening was when they first opened the CATA Multimodal Center in East Lansing, the old CEO would not allow the CATA bus to go in and out of that center, even though it was run by CATA. And unfortunately, if you used a mobility device like a cane, crutch, walker, wheelchair, if you took the bus from the other side of the street, used the bus from the other side of the street, you could not overcome the railroad track there because it was a barrier to mobility. And so you couldn't get to the multimodal center that way. So when Brad came on as CEO, and I brought that up again, he actually made it so that the bus would go into the CATA Multimodal Center, and it has ever since for several years now. And people that are MSU students and other students, other citizens love that service, okay? The other thing is that the board was purchasing new buses this past summer, or maybe it was in the spring, I guess. And we have ventilation systems in the top. What is that, the 1 minute?
Donna, you're at 3 minutes, so please try to.
So we have ventilation in the top of the buses, and we were purchasing buses again for the second time that did not have any ventilation for heat and air conditioning to the back of the, actually it was one of the.
Can we please wrap up?
Oh yeah, that's my time? Okay, so the ventilation system to the bus, I ended up getting CATA to purchase ventilation for the vans, the CATA vans, so that people with disabilities who have to ride Spectran, the little white vans, would be comfortable in the back. Otherwise, we were too hot in there in the summer, and we have to ride sometimes for long periods of time.
Please wrap up.
So, yes, so I've done my best to do what I can as a CATA board member for you, and I'm just at a loss. I think that not having a person with a disability on the board that rides all the services is really really not a good thing. So thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Donna. Next speaker.
I'm sorry, this next speaker will be Fred Wurtzel.
Fred.
Hi there.
Go ahead.
You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Stika and board members, I'm Fred Wurtzel. I'm president of the Capital Region Chapter of the National Federation of the Blind. I live at 1212 North Foster in Lansing. I'm calling in today to request that you reconsider the de-appointment, I guess if that's a word, of Donna Rose from the CATA board as president of the largest and oldest organization of the blind. It's very important to state that having a blind person on the CATA board is extremely important to have representation there. We have no objection on a personal level to the person that you're going to replace her with, except that she's not blind. I have no idea how much she rides the service or uses the service. I don't know whether she uses Spectran services or not. However, what's happening is Meridian Township has a history of appointing blind people to the CATA board, and I think it would be in everyone's best interest if you continue that tradition. I don't understand why Donna would be being removed from the board. She served, as she spoke on her own behalf, very well. We've been to many of the meetings where she has been in attendance, and we're very pleased with her representation there. So please reconsider this appointment. I'm sure there are other places where the new appointee could serve equally as well and represent the interests of Meridian Township just as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Do we have another speaker, Mr. Geebies?
Is going to be followed by Carla Hudson.
I didn't quite hear who the first one was, Mr. Geebies.
Carla Hudson is going
Oh,
to be
okay.
the next speaker.
Carla?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Carla Hudson, Meridian Township resident, Skyline Drive. I'm a user of all CATA services. 2020 is not only the year of the pandemic, but it is the year that persons with disabilities celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. In celebrating this landmark legislation, we have made great strides, but there still remains issues to be addressed. One of those is the barrier to public transportation. The unemployment rate amongst persons with disabilities remains at 70%. For the blind, it is 80%. The number one leading reason is the lack of access to quality public transportation. When I look at the current makeup of the CATA board, only 2 members use public transportation regularly. The input of those 2 members as users of the system is recognized as extremely valuable to the quality of transportation services persons with disabilities receive from the public transportation system. Getting a seat at the table on a board or commission that directly impacts your everyday life as a person with a disability is not easy. I understand that Ms. Rose is not being removed, but that her time on the board is not being reappointed. Historically, this position was held by another person with a disability and should continue in order that persons with disabilities voices can be heard. I understand that Ms. Rose has been given the option of serving on the local advisory committee, which is part of the CATA system. In my book, that is a demotion. It has been said that she is not being reappointed as we need a new voice at the table. So I've been told that we need a new voice at the table. I understand, I struggle with that answer as the new appointee once also served on the CATA board, the potential new appointee. Lastly, I might add that Ms. Rose serves another element of diversity on the committee for CATA as she is Native American. So if there's a diversity need, she would fit that as well. Thank you for your time.
Hello.
Thank you. Mr. Geebies, do we have another speaker?
We do, sir. Caller, can you please state your name and address for the public record?
My name is Phyllis Vaughn. My address is 6100 Baylog Court, Hazlet, Michigan. I'm calling regarding CATA. And I would like to make a statement that you don't have to have a disability to advocate for people with disabilities. I owned and operated an adult foster care home in DeWitt for over 12 years. And I got barriers removed on sidewalks and different things like that. I think we're doing really well with Ready Ride right now, and I'm a user of Ready Ride and SpecTran. And I'd just like to say that there are other disabilities besides being blind, and you can advocate for anybody without that disability. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Speakers, Mr. Geebies.
The next caller is Lily Hudson from inside the Zoom interface. Ms. Hudson, please state your name and address for the public record.
You're muted, Ms. Hudson.
Yeah. All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, my name is Lily Hudson. I'm the daughter of Michael and Carla Hudson, and I live on Skyline Drive. I will be voting in my first election come November, but I am no stranger to civic engagement, as I've watched my parents several times at these meetings advocate for change. I have been a transportation user since I was 6 weeks old, when my parents first lifted my stroller onto a CATA bus. Unlike many young people, and even some adults, I understand the struggle of the transportation user. I have seen over the years both positive and negatives to Ready Ride, CATA, SpecTran, and the fixed route systems. My family has conducted most life activities via these services. We did not own the family car, and I wore out lots of shoes walking to the bus. In hearing that Donna Rose would not be reappointed to the CATA board, I wanted to speak up regarding the importance of those who use the service having a voice. If those who do not use the service make up the majority, how do persons who use the service regularly ever get an opportunity to make a change? On a transportation board mostly comprised of people who drive, how can these individuals understand the everyday experience of a true transportation user? In not selecting a user of public transportation, it appears to me that you are missing a key factor to a transportation board appointment. Only a user can understand how it feels to stand in the freezing cold for a bus that is running behind, or the challenges it takes to carry groceries on a bus while juggling your cane. Only a true bus user can understand the desire to have the bus service run longer than 9 to 5, as life does not just stop at 5. Only a transportation user gets that once you leave the bus, you might just have a long walk home. I ask that whatever decision you make this evening, that you really consider what a true bus user is and consider inclusivity and equity in your appointment selection. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers, Mr. Geebies?
Yes, sir. Michael Hudson will be the next speaker. Please remember to state your name and address for the public record.
And start out by unmuting, Michael. Michael, you're mute.
Now can you hear me?
Yep.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Good. I'm sorry, I had too many mute buttons in front of me. Michael Hudson, 6009 Skyline Drive. I've been a passenger, a rider of CATA for 29 years. In fact, I will say it was one of the reasons I chose to start a career here in this town. And I'll tell you, it's been very refreshing to find people with disabilities involved in the management of CATA. It's been a good bus service through the years, one of the best, and I believe it's gotten better over the last 4 years. Donna Rose brings unique talents to the job, having been a lifetime rider of buses herself. These are not decisions that are taken lightly. It's the only way to move around, and she does the fixed routes, she does the paratransit routes, and every day she's gainfully employed thanks to the service. She's a homeowner, a taxpayer, and I'm very pleased to see people with disabilities in the driver's seat on these systems. She has not always been controversy-free, but nor has CATA. And I think Donna's helped CATA save some bad decision making, and in fact helped select a very outstanding director of CATA, who I'm imagining must enjoy a little bit of the support that Donna brings to the mix and the true understanding. And I will echo Donna. I attributed some of the things she's done. I know it was on my agenda to see that bus get into the CATA station. It was ironic to find a CATA station that didn't serve CATA bus routes. So that was fixed. I've seen dramatic expansions to where the Ready Ride goes in Meridian Township. It looked controversial. It probably ruffled some feathers, but ultimately it has become some of the best decision making that's been done, and the system is better for it. So before you remove Donna Rose, please consider these gifts of talent and immersive use of the bus system don't come every day, and I think you'd be making a mistake to reverse out of this. Perhaps other members could be swapped in and out to bring the diversity that you may be looking for, but Donna Rose is uniquely qualified and valuable to this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more, Mr. Geebies?
Yes, sir. We have Mr. Adam Carlson. Name and address for the public record, please.
Yes, Adam Carlson, 1495 Birchwood Drive. I am a member of the Meridian Township Economic Development Corporation. I've been a member for, I think, 8 years now, and I am speaking in support of the application before you for the Meridian Redevelopment Fund. This was vetted at a special meeting of the EDC in early October. And, you know, we had a lot of questions for the applicant. A lot of those were answered to our satisfaction. We are very supportive of the fact that, or I am very supportive of the fact that we are able to utilize this fund to see significant progress. The application, you know, is not perfect. I wish there was more we could do, but perfect would be that downtown Okemos had been redeveloped 10 years ago. Obviously, that's not the case, but this is significant positive progress in the right direction. and I am very supportive of it and would encourage the board to be supportive as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no other callers and no raised hands at this time, sir.
I'll give it just a moment in case somebody wants to raise their hand, or this is the time. Okay. Not hearing that there is anyone, so we'll move on further on the agenda. Next item is the Township Manager's Report. You're muted, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor and Board. I won't go into the Walnut Hills update, certainly because that's on the agenda later on this evening. You may recall that with the Indian Lakes and the ANDEV project, there's a need to memorialize the things that were stated during that process, and we're working on putting that together. One of the worst things to do is to have those kind of conversations and then not memorialize them into paper, and people wonder a year or two from now what's supposed to happen on that property. We're also working on with the Winslow Trailer Park on Grand River. Community development's working on that, trying to clean up the property. It's a gateway to the township, and we need to do better out there. There's an issue with some trailers and cottages. If you drive by the former Value Tire on Jolly Road, you're going to notice a shell of a building. And you may wonder what's going to become of that, again, right on our thoroughfare down on the south end of the township. Director Clark and planner Menser and I have been meeting with ownership of that building. The owner of that building also owns Capital Prime and another quite a few restaurants in the region, and wants to redevelop that in a great way. Our concern is what's it going to look like during COVID, and we've been working with that. We've reached an agreement on an immediate enhancement on the appearance of that building, so it doesn't look like it looks currently all winter. We're working, Chief Plaga and others are working on an address issue on Meridian Road. Doesn't seem like a major issue to some, but if you're that resident whose address has been automatically changed from Okemos to Williamston and there's problems with the mail service, it's a big deal, and we're working on that, trying to serve the residents. We've been responding to a litany of questions about the 3 millage proposals, the land preservation, the police and fire millages that are on the ballot here for November. Lots of questions from residents about those. What do they mean, and what does this reduction mean, and what happens if I don't vote for the reduction, and a number of questions. We've had some really good conversations with our voters. Pine Village, the Brownfield reimbursement plan for Pine Village up in Hazlet was approved by the Brownfield board last Thursday morning. If you go by the South Fire Station, anytime in the next couple of days, you'll see a lot of work going on there. You'll see the solar panels going onto the South Fire Station roof, and you'll also see the driveway improvements that are occurring in the front of the building. That's both of those projects are being done with cash, no debt, and coming out of the capital projects fund. Next up for solar is the marketplace. Again, a project that the board budgeted, and the solar, the same company that's doing the work at the fire station will then move to the solar on the marketplace. The Hazlet Marathon, that project's been around a fair number of years. And we now just recently, I think actually maybe on Monday, received a building permit to move forward with the redevelopment of that site. As you know, we need to augment our current 34 or 35 police officers that we have. And Chief Plaga has 2 candidates that we'll be meeting with tomorrow. Speaking of the fire department, the new ladder truck will be ordered this month, and it's about an 11-month delivery. So sometime next September, October, we'll keep our promise to the voters that was made in 2017 and deliver that ladder truck. The 2020 street project is completed under the direction of Manager Perry, and the list for 2021 has been completed. Needs some fine tuning. And that list will be presented to the board at your December 1 board meeting. So your first meeting in December, you'll receive that list. And finally, I want to talk just briefly about the marketplace. For those of you, and I think most everyone on the screen was there, there's some things you didn't hear that day that I think are important components of that project. That is to thank the Drain Commission office. There was an extensive challenge in the front of that with drainage, and it required us, even Manager Perry and I, to go down to Ingham County, work with our Drain Commissioner, and the office couldn't have been more helpful. They really were. They did get mentioned on that day, but their work was imperative. Without them, I don't know that we would have been able to move forward. I want to thank Manager Perry. You know, he wasn't one of the people that you named you heard on that day, but he did an incredible amount of work on this project. And I wanted to recognize that. I want to recognize Chief Plaga, another name you didn't hear that day, but Chief Plaga and I, when other folks couldn't find a sponsor for the main stage, $50,000 sponsorship, Chief Plaga and I went out and met with Delta Dental, and were able to bring back, to the generosity of Delta Dental, to bring back $50,000 for that project. The list goes on and on. The work that the Public Works crew themselves did, some of the work on the project. You know, you heard the names of the construction crews and all that, the people who were the work, but there were a lot of people behind the scenes that did a lot of work, and I wanted to thank them publicly because it's a big project. And it was a lot of work, and I appreciate that. So that's my report, unless there's any questions from the board, Mr. Supervisor.
Do any township trustees or board members have questions? Okay, I guess you're off the hook for the moment, at least, Mr. Manager. All right, we will now move on to board member reports of activities and announcements. Clerk Dreyfus.
Thank you, Supervisor. So I would like to present a election update. Want to talk about the activities and what's going on. First, I want to just cover some of the general information for the public, as I always do, to let people know where things are at in terms of what they can do from their own perspective. Let's start with people who are not registered voters. Meridian Township, most people are registered voters, but for a few people who are not, you can register to vote. At this point, you have to come to the clerk's office to register to vote. And you can do that all the way up through 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 3rd, and register and vote. And you'll be able to receive a ballot and vote. In terms of absentee ballots, we have issued and mailed out over 18,000 ballots. Obviously, a massive effort, and by far, historic proportions of ballots are going out across the state, and Meridian reflects those enormous numbers. I signed the document. The board authorized me to enter an agreement with Ingham County to have a joint AV counting board. I signed that agreement, and we are just getting those details together. It's going to be located at the sheriff's office in Mason, is where the AV counting board is going to be. And we've sent a list over of 24 election inspectors that will work the AV counting board in Mason. And we're still going to get more to make sure that we have a full pool. We do anticipate always last minute cancellations. The great news is that we have a plethora of election inspectors applications, and we don't need to recruit and do activities to try to get more people to join to work at the polling locations. It seems like the pandemic combined, oddly enough, the pandemic combined with the intensity of the political conflicts going on in our country has led a number of citizens and people who don't live in Meridian, because you don't need to live in Meridian to be an election inspector, to want to roll up their sleeves and work the elections, basically. And, for years, we've had to do a lot of things to try to induce people and come up with different marketing techniques, and there's books and workshops on the topic. And so right now we have much more. We're going to be rotating people around. And in fact, just to be fair and to try to do things really well, we're actually going to try to just get a couple of new people in some new positions, even try to get somebody new in a chair position here or there, because we want to really get this new blood circulating through the whole election team. So that's all really good news. All the polling locations will likely have They're all gonna have a minimum of 5. I was really concerned we could even get 3 or 4, but we're gonna have a minimum of 5, and most of them will likely have 6 or more, which means we can have greeters that work before you sign the application to get a ballot. That really helps a lot with voter interaction. That's a person that can come down the line and help people make sure they're in the right location and other voter information. Okay, so let's talk about a couple other issues too that was mentioned. There's been a big emphasis on drop boxes throughout the state of Michigan. Laws were passed about this. The good news is Meridian's been doing this ahead of the curve before I even came on board. This Meridian has been committed to a 24-hour drop box in front of the building. And so that's always proud. I'm always proud when I hear what's going on at the statewide level and know we have been doing this for a very long time. There's the speaker that Mr. McConnell said that there was an overflow situation. It happened once. I don't know where the other information comes from, but it happened one time, and it was a unique circumstance. In all the years I've been doing this, it was one time it happened, and that was after a July 4th holiday weekend here for the previous primaries when it happened. We've had it get filled. It never got overfilled. Aside from that situation where it was ever any danger of ballots not going in or ballots being retrieved. And it is within, of course, within eyeshot of the police department. So the drop box works well. It's taken out periodically. We get questions from people all the time about the drop boxes and the nature of it and how it works. And the answer is simple. Throughout the day, they're periodically taken out, and they are processed like they would if they came through the mail, or if they were handed in at the counter, and they're time-stamped, entered in, and of course they go through the normal process of signature verification and then the rest of the ballot processing procedures. In terms of what's happening at polling location that we have here, we are involved in the 40-day election cycle, which began September 24th. All voters can vote in Meridian Township at the town hall building. During our business hours, they can come into the building and they can vote. You can call it early voting, but that's not the proper term anymore. It's just that we can vote, and the voting cycle's for 40 days, and voters can come in and vote. We're also open late on Thursdays for the entire month of October. We're open till 7 p.m. on Thursdays for voter convenience. We're also going to be open on Saturday, October 31st from 9 to 5 to also assist voters and getting ballots. In terms of what's happening at the actual hall, there has been poll watchers that have come in. We have had no more than, I believe, 2 at any given moment that have come into the town hall room. We have guidelines. The people that work in the room understand what the roles of a poll worker and what the limitations are. There's 2 types of observers that can come in a polling location: a challenger and a poll watcher. The 2 have some distinct differences. There's some similarities between the 2. The most important similarities are that they cannot interact with voters. They can't impede the voter process. Now, given COVID, they also cannot contribute to any interference with COVID safety precautions. So I have had to go in and have had to situate them sometimes and move them in a place where they're 6 feet away from everybody and people coming in the door. And it's a tight situation. So ultimately, people have to recognize that we're really having to do things in a new manner. We've never done this before. We're ad-libbing. We have tight space constraints at the township hall. Everybody knows that. You know what the town hall room looks like. It's tight. It's tight as a voting location. We're also using it as a staging area for all sorts of election processing because we don't have space anywhere else. Plus, with COVID, we need 6-foot distancing. So we have some serious logistical constraints, and that also affects how voters can come in. We don't want them walking through the whole building, so we're keeping them come as close to the entrance to the town hall room as possible through that back exit door is the main way in and out. All of that, again, presents some, challenges because then people can, back up in that area, and we don't want congestion anywhere. So that's the stuff we're working with. We've had, challenges. Our, full-time staff is working long hours. We have limits in terms of the amount of people that can access QVF. So that results in some backlogs and some stress during the day as we're trying to deal with the backlog of AV apps and AVs when they were happening. We are all caught up. Everybody has, we're on a daily basis and we are smooth functioning, but it's pretty hairy for a week or two. So that's the state of where things are at right now. And voters in Meridian Township can come in and vote, as I said before, all the way up through Monday, November 2nd, 4 p.m. Voters can also spoil a ballot by coming into the building and signing a simple statement that says they wish to spoil their AV ballot and get a new ballot, either to take with them or vote there, or decide they want to vote at the polling location. So those are some options. Voters can also take their AV ballot to the polling location if they don't get an opportunity, and they can surrender their ballot at the polling location and also vote in person there as well. So those are some of the key aspects of what's going on with the election at this time.
Thank you very much. Other board members, any reports, activities? Yes, Treasurer DeShane. You're muted, Treasurer.
On March 8th, I attended the Economic Development Corporation meeting, and the main objective of this meeting was to review the Meridian Redevelopment Fund request from locals that we'll be discussing tonight. Also on the 8th, with Trustees Sunland and Cliff Dreyfus, I attended the Meridian Township Election Commission meeting, where we appointed the 8 board officials that will be the county center and our own election workers and inspectors. With the rest of the board and many people at this meeting, I was also at the ribbon cutting for the new marketplace on the Green on March 7th. An excellent new farmers market we now have. There were lots of people who thanked, including this board, commission, Director Maisner, many community leaders and groups that contributed, all a very successful team. I do think there was one person who was not a limelight that maybe should have been, and that for the success of the market, that was our own manager, Frank Walsh. He managed this process with skill and kind of led from behind. And I think we've had a lot of great ideas and projects pitched to us, and not all of them come to fruition. I think because of the manager's passion and skill and great work, this dream came true. As a result, we have a great farmers market. We should all be very proud. Thanks to everyone who contributed, and thank you, in particular tonight, Manager Walsh, for your leadership on the new marketplace in the group.
Other board members, any reports? Yes, the Trustee Sunland.
Yes, so I was going to report on the Meridian Redevelopment Fund application in the Village of Okemos, but we've already had a report from Phil DeShane, and we've already talked about this redevelopment in Okemos. So the only other thing, only other item that I have to report on is I went to the Communications Commission meeting, and they are updating their policies in diversity. So we're gonna stay tuned for that. But yeah, I was gonna report on Economic Development Corporation, and I was gonna report on the Election Commission, but everybody else is on top of it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And you have indirectly reported as well. So that's good. Okay. Other board members, any reports? I don't see any more hands. Oh, I do. Trustee Apser.
Yes, I would just like to report that the CATA board will be meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. at the usual time via Zoom. And as I previously reported on, we've been in the process of developing an advertising policy, which would prospectively generate anywhere from 1 to 1.2 million on an annual basis. We are nearing the adoption process. There's going to be an amendment offered tomorrow at the board meeting, but the policy committee, which I serve on, has been developing this over about the last 18 months. It's a very strict policy while adhering to First Amendment rights, but we do not allow political speech. It does address the issue of express advocacy, which is kind of this dark money element under Citizens United. And it's also very comprehensive in terms of certain content that we would not want visible on our buses from an advertising policy, whether it's adult material, firearms, alcohol, and other products. So if anybody has any specific questions, or if you'd like to review the policy, I can forward that to you. But that is nearing the process of being adopted. And just wanted to put that out there, and there will be further discussions with municipalities as the stations themselves would have advertising opportunities over time as they're upgraded to the new stations that you're seeing in the region. So obviously there's right-of-way implications for the local units of government. So Meridian Township will also play a role as we near that process. And that is my report.
Any other first time around on the reports? I'll mention that in addition to, of course, being at the Marketplace on the Green, grand opening and ribbon cutting, today I attended a Zoom meeting with our Congresswoman Slotkin, the 8th Congressional District, and various community leaders. And unfortunately, things remain where they are in terms of Congress and the Senate and the White House getting together. So at this point, it's not looking very promising on something happening before the election to give relief to our citizens and our local businesses. Mr. Dreyfuss, you had something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, not to belabor the election issue, but I needed to clarify about the drop box because I forgot that I needed to answer the one key issue about that, and that is the overflow occurred on a Sunday. It doesn't happen during the week. It happened on a Sunday and happened on a holiday weekend. So as a measure, we've come in on Sundays now periodically to make sure that it won't happen again. So that's how we address the overflow issue. Is the only time that could feasibly happen would have been over the weekend. And so I came in on a couple of Sundays just to make sure that, and the mailbox was only not even half full. So I just needed to clarify that.
Great. Thank you. It's important that our voters know that their ballots will get in and be counted. Treasurer DeShane.
Yes, regarding the millage questions before on the ballot, the police and fire millage are pretty straightforward. There was a question that's come in several times regarding the land preservation fund, which this board has recommended being reduced from 0.3 to 0.1 approximately. The question I've gotten is if they vote no on that land preservation millage, will it revert to 0.3? And the answer is no, it will go to 0. So those that are observing that, the choice is 0.1, or if you vote no, the majority votes no, there'll be no land preservation fund.
That's an important point. I've had the same question from citizens who they think perhaps if they vote no, they're going to keep the 0.3. The reality is it's expiring. So if you vote no, we won't have a land preservation fund. So the alternative is to vote yes to keep it at 1.1. Okay. Anyone else? If not, we'll move on. And our next thing is the approval of the agenda. Treasurer DeShane. I'm reading his lips and he's moving to approve the agenda.
I move for approval of the agenda as presented.
Okay. And I believe I read Ms. Sunland's lips seconding that. Is that right? Yes. All right. Okay. Any need to remove anything? Or anything on the minutes? Then we need a vote. Clerk Dreyfuss.
Oh, on the approval of the agenda, because are we on the consent agenda?
Approval of the agenda.
The agenda, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Supervisor Stika.
Yes.
Clerk Dreyfuss votes yes. Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Jackson. Oh, Trustee Opsmer, excuse me.
Yes.
Trustee Sundlin.
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Agenda is approved, 6-0.
Okay, so then the next item is the consent agenda. We have communications. We have our minutes from October 6th for the virtual regular meeting, and then finally we have our bills that need to be paid. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda? Trustee Wazinski.
I'll move to adopt the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second? Griffiths, you second it? Any discussion? All right, then we need a roll call on this, Clerk Griffiths.
Trustee Opsimer,
Yes.
trustee Sunland,
Yes.
trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
supervisor Stika,
Yes.
clerk Dreyfus votes yes, treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Consent agenda approved 6-0.
Thank you. Questions for the attorney? I didn't see any. He's not here, or she's not here, either one. We'll now move on to our hearings. And the first hearing, or the only hearing, is the Meridian Township Redevelopment Fund application. And who is introducing this, Manager Welsh?
I will, Mr. Supervisor, and then Director Clark will is available as well to answer any questions, or she will also handle the discussion later on when the board discusses it. The redevelopment fund was created 2 or 3 years ago, and its original corpus was $700,000. A portion of that was used for the small business grant program that was initiated by the board. And in next year's about $130,000 of that 700. Those funds are budgeted in the 2021 budget to bring it back to its original corpus of $700,000. The request before you this evening is in the range of $82,000, $85,000, somewhere in that range. And those funds would be used in conjunction with 4 or 5 other pots of funding to take down the buildings at the Village of Okemos with some deadlines and timetables before you. This went before the Meridian Redevelopment, or the Meridian Economic Development Corporation maybe a week ago, and received unanimous support from the EDC to recommend approval from the Township Board. So there's about $700,000 in the fund effective on next year's budget. There's 570 approximately now. So the request before you is just over 10% of the entire fund. I'm sure that the requester that's on tonight will go into where the other pots are. So I don't want to be redundant. I'm sure they'll cover where the other pots of funding are coming from to get, I believe the demolition cost is over $800,000 if I recall. So that's kind of a brief synopsis, Mr. Supervisor and Board, of what's before you this evening. And I know that the Mr. Randall and Mr. Helser are on this call. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Supervisor.
All right, do we have anything that Mr. Randall or Mr. Helser wants to tell us before we open up for the public for the hearing?
Yes, this is Eric Helser. If I could make a couple quick comments to address what the supervisor had alluded to. We do have several other sources of funds. We are very thankful for the Meridian Township Redevelopment Fund consideration. So we first off want to thank you for taking this matter up. Your portion of it is one particular source. We have another source of funds that is coming from the formerly Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, now EGLE, the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. We have been successful in working with the township and the securing of funds for that, and they're contributing about $691,000 toward both blocks 1 and 2. And for those that are on the webinar right now, block 1 is north of Hamilton and west of Okemos Road. It is in that north west quarter section. And then the block 2 is in the southwest section, south of Hamilton Road and west of Okemos Road. And then the developer is also going to be fronting about $232,000 toward the overall budget. And then the last thing I'll end with is that we have prepared this as a budgetary estimate. We have met with contractors to secure costs for this budget estimate. However, we will be going to competitive bid. That is a requirement of EGLE when you use these types of funds, and I'm sure the township would want that anyway. And we will be doing that in order to hopefully do better on our pricing to secure more competitive prices. It has been challenging with COVID and how busy contractors are and the lack of labor. It has been difficult. So we're hopeful that we can beat these numbers, but it could become tough just based on certain experiences that we're encountering right now. That will begin relatively soon, assuming that we do get a favorable approval here today. And we're going to be proceeding expeditiously toward the demolition of both blocks. And it's going to start with asbestos abatement. And it is complete demolition of both blocks, with the exception of one building that is on the block one, the north block. It is the far northwest building that will remain. All other buildings will be raised and the holes will be filled, with the exception of some environmental work that is ongoing on block 2 due to a dry cleaner site. That location will remain open until spring at least, while we do the balance of the work. So I appreciate the time and happy to take any questions, but I'll turn it back over to you, Ron.
Okay, any other preliminary statements before we open the public hearing? All right, if not, then at 7:06, I will open the hearing to the public and ask Mr. Geebies if there's anyone who is indicating a need to speak or to ask questions during this public hearing on the Meridian Township Redevelopment Fund application.
Remind people that they're welcome to call in at 517-349-1232, or of course, inside the Zoom interface, they can simply raise hands and we'll enable them to speak. I am hearing no telephones ring. I am seeing no hands raised, sir.
Okay, looking at the screen and looking at the participants, I didn't see either. So at this point, we will close the public aspect of the hearing a minute later. And we will then have this matter come up later in the meeting for discussion. We will now move on to our action items. And the first one is the board and commission appointments. Have in your packet a memorandum from me. These are board appointments to various boards and commissions. It's the beginning of a series. You'll be seeing some probably at every meeting for the next few meetings. This one includes a recommendation. We've had actually technically a vacancy in Canada for a year, with Donna Rose continuing to serve during the interim because she was not replaced the last year when her time was up. The Land Preservation Board had a couple of resignations. We have one good applicant who the board itself has recommended fill in for one of those. And then the East Lansing Meridian Water and Sewer Authority also had a resignation. And we have a recommendation for a spot there. So I would entertain motions. DeShane.
I move to approve Supervisor Steiker's appointments to our boards and commissions. Those recommendations are to serve on the CATA board for term expiration date of 9/20/2022. Chris Parnell to the Land Preservation Advisory Board for a term of expiration of 12/31/2024, and James Eklund to the Meridian Water and Sewer Authority with an expiration date of 6/30/2022.
Technically, these are actually the board's appointments, not mine. I just made recommendation. So if you want to clarify that in your motion, it's the board appointing these people.
Okay, I move that the following, that those recommendations be made. You can remove Supervisor Steiker's recommendations from my motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Or
Trustee Wazinski was seconded. Is that correct? Trustee?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion, Mr. DeShane?
Yeah, I think we have three excellent candidates here for these boards. We are well served by many dozens and dozens of community volunteers who serve on our boards and commissions. I don't have a sense that we are throwing anyone off any of our boards and commissions. We are moving new people onto our boards and commissions. I think the board itself should be doing that as well. When our appointments in January, I've served on transportation for 4 years. I think it's time for someone else to serve in commission now. I think trustee Summer has been on the CATA board for 4 years. It might be better to have another member there. I think it's good for different citizens and for different board members to serve on these boards and commissions. We're very fortunate. We have a wealth of very good and committed volunteers to serve on these boards and commissions, and I'm excited about these 3 that will be serving. And by no means is these appointments an insult for anyone who's on those boards. As you recommended, as you noted, Ms. Rose has served not her 3-year term, 4-year term, and she served very well. We've been very fortunate. She's been an advocate for blind and other handicapped citizens and presented those citizens and the entire township very well. And we owe her big thanks for her service on this board.
Is there the second or first, Ms. Wozinski?
I would echo what Treasurer DeShane has said. I think all 3 candidates are exceptional. I also would like to thank the previous board members, and I do think all the input is valuable and has helped a lot of folks with our disabled community, specifically to CATA. But I do also agree that it's important that we capture multiple voices, and knowing that we don't have a minority voice on the CATA board. I think it's a really good time to potentially excited that we have an applicant that is willing to do that. So I would also support Supervisor Steicha's appointment suggestions.
So it was mentioned during public comment that, well, first, before I say that, I wanted to say that I do support the Land Preservation Advisory Board appointment, and I do support the East Lansing Meridian Water and Sewer Authority appointments. The recommendations made by the supervisor, I agree with, and I think that they're good appointments to join these public bodies. My comments are regarding the appointment as the CATA for the CATA representative. It was pointed out that the recommendation by Supervisor of Robin Lewis, that Robin Lewis has served previously on the CATA board. Is that true?
Yes, as a Lansing representative.
Okay, so if the argument is that we want new people on the board, I don't understand why with other possibilities, why we would bring somebody back that's already served. There are other people, I'm sure we could have had an outreach to get other people to serve in that role. So my first concern is that we're not getting a new voice. This is not to criticize Robin. Obviously, her background is exemplary. I listened with her public comments and appreciated her volunteer community service, her credentials and her background, all excellent, and would make a wonderful addition to any public body, clearly, that she wants to participate in. This is about this particular board circumstances and what's going on right here with the existing person whose term is expiring. So this isn't about anybody about who's going to replace her. This is about the existing person right now, from the way I'm looking at it. And that is that we're not really bringing in someone new under that, guys. We're bringing in somebody that has had some experience before. So therefore, we have to really look at why is Donna Rose being replaced. And I think that the argument is that Donna doesn't always toe the line. She actually is a maverick. She thinks outside the box. She actually has comments that are often piercing and cutting edge, and that can sometimes be off-putting to other people. She's bright, she's funny, and she comes up with some interesting insights that are very useful to the public body's debate here and also at CATA. She is a person with a disability. She's blind, and actually a blind person is a phenomenal individual, a person of her communication skills and her discernment, because she becomes sort of like a walking observer and acknowledgement of what's going on around her. She pays a lot of attention. So she looks and understands a lot of the nuances of the public transit system that she's using. She does represent key diversity and equity and inclusion principles, because blind people have been excluded from public participation for a very long time for a variety of reasons, including lack of ability to get to public meetings. And we've known issues in the past that Ready Ride has issues with people that wanted to be on the Transportation Commission. because of circumstances of how Ready Ride services operated. So we have to work through these things, these conundrums that arise about how, public transit works. So getting back to Donna Rose, I think that really we have to look also at like other boards and commissions. Well, we have renewals of all the important on the planning commission, on the environmental commission. Whenever there's renewals, as far as I'm aware, almost nobody is not renewed because we have applicants that want those and we don't pick new people. We typically renew those who express interest. Generally, we do that. That's a pretty straightforward policy. It's extremely rare that we've ever had somebody who wants to serve again not be able to serve again. In all my time, I just don't recall. I know it's happened, but it's extremely, extremely rare. The other issue is that, I don't know what type of message this sends to the community at large. It's like, again, when we start picking certain different characteristics of things to try to fill slots in, it really starts becoming, again, you could even call it a form of discrimination again. Which particular diversity characteristics are we looking for? Again, our community has a lot of not Native Americans, but we have actually Indians from India. We have a high percentage of people from India. And I think that we're lacking representation from people from India throughout our government and throughout our local participatory area. And I don't know if we're doing outreach to that community, nor to the Asian American community. So again, this is getting very murky. We have a blind person with a lot of experience who wants to serve again. I think that there'll be time for Robin to be able to serve again. There'll be new opportunities coming down the road. And I think it's wise for us to hold on to a valuable resource and have an ally in the disability community working with Meridian Township. It's a win-win with her completely. And I don't see why we have to get into some sort of divisive situation here. And I think we could save the day. Well, everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes. We all made mistakes. Public bodies make mistakes. We can simply pull back from this for a moment. Maybe we should table this for just 2 weeks and consider it as a thought, as that's a possibility. So I'll hold off on making that tabling motion if I can get any support from anybody about reconsidering this motion.
Trustee Asher.
I just want to clarify something that Supervisor Stika said when these were introduced. The term was actually a 2-year term appointed in September 2016, expiring on September 30th of 2018. So effectively, the term was renewed for an additional 2 years. It's been 2 years or 4 years now and 1 month. So effectively, she was reappointed for a 2-year term. On the issue of diversity within the authority, the LAC, which has been referenced, presently has 4 members of the blind community serving on it, and it's an 11-member body, 10 of whom who have a disability of some nature, and then the 11th member is a senior citizen. Meridian Township has had along, as members of the public and have noted, Meridian Township has often had a member of the disability community and specifically even the blind community on the CATA board. The diversity on the CATA board, the lacking of it is really coming from the other member jurisdictions. Delhi has a member of the disability community serving on the board though today. So it's not as if there isn't anyone of a disability serving on the CATA board today. There is a disability present, but Lansing and East Lansing specifically right now haven't had a great deal of diversity in recent times. And that goes for disability status and also race and ethnicity as well. So just to make sure that everyone's aware of that. And it was made aware to me that given the recommendation that's before us tonight, Executive Director Funkhauser planned to appoint or recommend Ms. Rose's appointment to the LAC. I don't know the status on that, but that's what I've been informed, that that recommendation is coming. In addition to that, looking at the other appointments, I just wanted to note for everyone that the Land Preservation Advisory Board did make a motion and approved it unanimously to appoint Chris Parnell for the term that's listed there in the packet from Supervisor Stika. And I just had one question for Supervisor Stika because it isn't detailed on the memorandum. Mr. Supervisor, when are these terms effective? When do they begin?
Because they're replacing people who either resigned or whose terms expired, they would begin now. They would begin as soon as they take their oath of office.
Okay, including CATA, because we do have a CATA board meeting tomorrow.
Well, I technically, yes. And by the way, as far as the information I had with regard to CATA, my understanding of the term and the vacancy came from the clerk's office. So my information came from our own office. Further discussion? Clerk Dreyfus.
Thank you for the follow-up. So I just wanted to comment because of the board dialogue that was just presented. I don't think the couple of comments that were made were really apples. They were apples and oranges. They really weren't equating to the same things. So two of the comments that were made, the first is that she was actually reappointed for an additional 2 years in effect. That's not true. It's simply known as she's filling a vacancy in the meantime, and that's happened many, many times. And that you're just serving in a limbo state, and it's serving. Yes, you are in that role, but that's not a reappointment. It's just because the appointment process hasn't been filled. So just because you're in that role does not mean that you've been reappointed. You're actually serving kind of in a limbo state, and that just shows the good nature of a person who keeps taking it on in that manner. The second is the comment that it's got part of this advisory, that you can be part of an advisory council. I think one of the comments again about diversity and equity and inclusion types of comments are that there's two different roles. One is a board representative role, and the other is at an advisory role. And I think that there's a difference here between the two. I'm sure it would be nice that Donna Rose is given the opportunity to serve in another capacity, in some sort of advisory capacity, and so her voice can be heard somewhat. But it's different than serving as a board representative role. And that's what we all know, is that those are just different levels of participation. And I think that's what we're really looking at here, is maintaining that higher level of participation. So I know that I'm going to be supporting Donna Rose. This is not a vote against Robin, as I wanted to be absolutely clear. This has nothing to do with any person that had been appointed for this position, not recommended for this position. This is about the current person, who I believe is eminently qualified, meets the criteria for diversity and inclusion and things that we're looking for, has an able person, has shown herself to be worthy and wants to continue. And I think she deserves another term of office to be able to continue her service. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? We will vote, and the motion that was made was actually one motion for all three positions for the terms that are listed in the memorandum that you have in front of you. We need a roll call.
Trustee Sunland.
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Supervisor Stika.
Yes.
Clerk Dreyfus votes no. Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1.
Thank you. We now move on to our next agenda. Yes, our next action item, which is the 2021 Township Board meeting schedule resolution. I have in front of you a proposed schedule, which was similar to the one we've had every year, adjusted for various holidays and election dates. And I know that Treasurer DeShane wants to include a retreat at some point as a follow-up to the one we did last before COVID hit us. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the meeting schedule, and then we can talk about whether we want to amend it or how we want to change it. Trustee Opsimer.
I move to adopt the 2021 Township Board meeting schedule resolution.
Is there support? Supported by Ms. Sunland. Opsimer. Any discussion?
Yeah, the calendar looks fine to me. I see that we've moved the meetings in August and November to the Thursday following the prospective election. And spring break has been covered by meeting the second and third Tuesdays of the month of April. However, I don't know how necessary that will be given the likelihood that spring break won't really be taking place, but it looks good to me.
The Treasurer DeShane.
Would like to move an amendment, make an amendment that we add Saturday, February 20th as the date of the annual retreat at a location to be determined. And as it with last year, that retreat will be open.
Is there support for that motion to amend, to add a retreat date on Saturday, February 20th?
Question.
Trustee Opsmer?
Support.
I have a question before you make the motion, continue with the motion.
Go ahead.
I didn't know if we added it last year because just because a quorum is present and that doesn't mean it could be posted, but doesn't mean you have to, I'm just saying that for your own sake, you don't necessarily have to add this as an official meeting, because as an official meeting, you go through go through some of the steps of that. So it's up to you. I mean, if you just wanted to go through the extra steps of having to do that or not.
Well, at this point, since the motion's been made, it'd be nice for the public to know ahead of time that that's our plan.
Okay.
And, if COVID changes something, we'll deal with it then, I guess. Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment, which is stand to February 20th, Saturday? All right, do we need a vote on that? Unfortunately, with virtual, we always have to have the clerk call us. Clerk, Travis.
Yeah, I'm just, the amendment was, DeShane made it and it was seconded by Opsimer.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So we're voting on the amendment right now?
Correct.
Okay. Trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
Supervisor Stika,
Yes.
Clerk Dreyfus votes yes. Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer,
Yes.
and Trustee Sunland.
Yes.
Okay, so the amendment passes 6-0.
Okay. Is there any further discussion before we vote on the entire schedule of meetings for the following year? Ms. Sutherland.
I was just wondering, in the month of April, we have a Tuesday, the 13th, and Tuesday, the April 20th. And so I'm just wondering, even though we're saying that perhaps spring breaks or vacations may not be scheduled during that time period, that is a popular month to go on vacation in April. So I'm just kind of questioning the two meetings 1 week apart.
And having two meetings at all, just have one in April, is that what you're suggesting? Or different dates?
I just know I'm looking ahead even in my schedule, and I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to make either one of those meetings. Because they're, I have breaks scheduled like on starting like the week of the 13th and continuing into the following week. So I'm just wondering.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, we have to have meetings on a regular basis in order to pay bills, et cetera. And so there's going to be a meeting in April. Mr. DeShane.
Thank you. Yeah, we are constitutionally required to approve. Now, there are cases where bills get approved. They have to be written because of a sense of urgency prevails. But our general practice is that all bills are presented to the board for approval. And if we don't meet for 3-4 weeks, that is really difficult for our accounts payable department to stack up those bills and pay them all at once. Not to mention difficult on our vendors. On top of that, we have already moved that first April meeting. It normally would be April 6th, the first week, which is traditionally spring break week. So that and it'd be great if by April we were all going on spring break again. Okay, I mean that's just a wish right now with this COVID. But that's why we typically move that second the first meeting in April to the second Tuesday, and then meet the third Tuesday as well, because we do try and accommodate not just for ourselves, but also for citizens that might want to be part of the meeting, observe the meeting. They are less likely to be around that first week in April because that's the school spring break typically. But I think it's really important that this board meet twice a month. There's a lot of business we've had this past year. We're going to have even more decisions and policy decisions to make in 2021. And I would hate to see us meet once a month. Plan on that. It could happen that we cancel the meeting, but I would rather see that there's nothing on the agenda, therefore we are able to cancel. That's happened once or twice the past 4 years, but it's pretty rare that we don't have a full agenda for this board every 2 weeks.
All right, and you know, I think at this point it behooves us to assume that the schools, I mean, the ISD and the school districts at this point are presuming they're going to be having vacation that week, the first week of April. I think we have to look at it that way. None of us knows the exact future with regard to the epidemic that's going on. Any further discussion? All right, then we need a vote, clerk.
Supervisor Steiger.
Yes.
Clerk Dreyfus votes yes. Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer.
Yes.
Trustee Sundland.
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
We now move on to our discussion items, and the first one is the Meridian Township Redevelopment Fund, which we had the hearing on earlier. I know that Mr. Hauser and Mr. Randall are still with us in case questions come up during our discussion. But this is the board's discussion, so who wants to get started? Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. I intend to support this expenditure for our redevelopment fund. The Village of Okemos area that we're trying to redevelop is one of our 3 PICAs that we created about 3 years ago. In terms of the sense of pride of our community rather than embarrassment, it's essential that we do something in these 4 corners of downtown Okemos that are now blighted. Remember that PICA stands for Potential Intensity Change Areas, PICA. With this funding and others, we're going to turn potential into actual change. We're going to get rid of the blight, remove it. This is a much needed change for Okemos and Okemos in our entire township, and for that reason, we need to do something and do something soon. This will lay the ground for the redevelopment of the 4 corners. We had all hoped that it was going to happen a year ago or more. It hasn't happened yet. This is a necessary first step. Until we remove the buildings, until we remove the asbestos, nothing can be developed there. So better late than never, but it's got to be done. The thing I like about this proposal is, well, it's a lot of money, $85,481 for eligible cost. Really encourage that Mr. Randall, the developer, has brought a lot of the investors' money into this proposal as well. $232,000, about 3 times as much as we're investing, and that they've been able to leverage EGO grants of $691,000, 8 times our investment. So my fear when we saw this proposal is that we were doing all the heavy lifting here, and about $85,000 is nothing to sneeze at. It's about 10% of the cost, 50 or 75 or 100% of the cost. So I thank the developer for taking the instruction from this board and using other way in addition to the redevelopment fund. I also like the schedule to be done. The vast majority of it, according to their time frame, says fall 2020, which means as soon as it's finally approved and they get the bids back for the work, and so that could mean as soon as November and all through November, December, that is what they are calling the fall of 2020. It'll be good to have this blight brought down and to do it now and to do it right, to remove the basements, to remove the asbestos, to do it so that it really is redevelopment ready. So for those reasons, I intend to support this redevelopment funding from our redevelopment fund. Thank you.
Other board members, discussion? I will make mention that the Economic Development Corporation that we have, the Meridian one, did vet this at a recent meeting after a very good discussion. They did recommend that this proceed, that this money be allocated. Trustee Opsimer, you're muted.
Yeah, Manager Walsh, just a quick question for you. It's probably in the back. It's come across it. What is our contingency should the demolition not proceed as presented in the schedule? And more specifically, should it not be completed by the December 15th deadline in terms of our contribution or the grant specifically?
That's a good question. We really struggle with that. And Director Clark, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think where it came down to is that the timing on this, and because getting it through Eagle at the state was a big hurdle for us to get through to make sure that they were going to allow the state funding to be able to augment the township's money and the developer's money. And so the December 15th deadline, although I'd love to see it all happen before then, isn't probably, it's not going to happen. Will there be action going on before December 15th? Yes. Will actually a building come down before December 15th? We hope. But to tell you tonight that it's all going to be done before December 15th, in my opinion, isn't likely. Mr. Helzer can correct me if I'm wrong. Will there be progress by then? Yes. And what is the toll gate for us, to answer your question directly, Mr. Trustee? We don't have one. When we were talking about the potentially of spending 50%, contributing 50% because we didn't know the state would be involved. We didn't know that the developer would come up with $250,000. That's when I thought we were talking about a tight deadline, and if you don't do it by then, since our funding request has gone from 50 down to 10%, I personally become a little bit more lax with that and understanding. I know that it took a lot of time to get Eagle to come around, and they have, and they've been a great player in all this. So that's where I'm at. If there are deadlines that are imposed, they would have to come from the board tonight, but I would caution you that unless I'm corrected by the developer, I don't think everything is too rosy to say that everything's going to be down by December 15th.
Yes, to follow up on that, we're not remitting payment under these grants though until the work specified and outlined is completed, right? We're not just handing over one lump sum grant.
You're correct, sir. This is a reimbursable plan.
Mr. Helzer, can you speak to what your current timeline looks like?
Yep. And I think the supervisor did a great job. So he teed me up well. So thank you. Our current timeline is exactly as you see it, except for it's out of our control. And I should say with when we're going to get the official approval from Eagle. I will say it has left the staff's desk and it is in the paperwork process to getting approved. So once that occurs, we're kind of off to the races regarding their aspect of it. However, I will tell you in parallel, if we're approved today, we will begin immediately tomorrow with the work of securing specifications for both the demolition and the asbestos abatement. We are also going to begin the asbestos survey and pre-demolition survey, which will also get embodied into those specifications. So we're trying to do as much as we can in advance of that Eagle approval. Ultimately, that will be the award. So there's a qualifications and proposal process that we're going to be going through, but I do anticipate you will see iron on the ground in December. But to the level of the demolition and work that's completed, that is difficult for me to say. I will agree with what the supervisor's comment is based on where we're at today, and then weather. We're also going to be getting into weather. While it's a great time to do demolition is in the winter, it does slow down, but we do have better conditions from more solid conditions on the ground, dust control and those kinds of things. We have less traffic. It is just better in itself to do demolition in the winter, especially subsurface work. So it won't be completed by the 15th. We will be updating weekly, and Will Randall is on the phone here. We will be notifying the public. We will do it through social media, and we will be communicating our schedule and our progress all along the way until we have a flat table out there. So, in a flat site, as we call it, flat table. But that's our plan, and we will keep you apprised.
Okay. And one other follow-up question. So where has the scope of work broadened in working with Eagle? Because originally we were, at least cost-wise, only looking at, I thought, like 600,000.
Yep, you're correct. And that was for block 2. When we got Eagle engaged, we added block 1, the north block. We also included additional work, which is for complete site demolition. That site demolition will not occur. There is a detailed schedule in one of the attachments to the application that breaks it down in a lot more gory detail. But that site demolition is not going to occur until mid next year. And the reason we're going to leave a lot of that asphalt pavement in place is we have a significantly contaminated property, and the more impervious surfaces that we leave on the ground, the better for the environment until we go to vertical construction and start our development. So that was another reason for the increase. Eagle was willing to complete the full demolition, which included the site demo. So 2 factors, block 1 added and site demolition activities as well.
Okay. And that sheeting and shoring along the streetscape where we have the foundation so close to the utilities and the infrastructure like the sidewalk at both corners. I assume that sheeting and shoring will just be left there until site work begins.
Yes, it will begin. Well, actually, I take that back. The sheeting and shoring, there's 2 sheeting and shorings. There's existing sheeting and shoring right now that you see, and that is in the south block in the northwest corner of the south block. That was for the environmental activities. That's going to remain until vertical construction goes. There's a basement that's going to be located, a couple of basements in that location. So that sheeting and shoring is going to remain. The sheeting and shoring that is for this work, for the demo, in order to protect infrastructure, is temporary. It is not going to stay in place. That's why the cost is so low. We've got better than $250,000, for example, just in that one corner in sheeting and shoring alone. We're far from that. This is temporary sheeting and shoring to protect infrastructure during foundation and basement removal.
Okay, so once you fill it back in, you're going to remove.
It's going to come out. Yep. Yep.
And then final question. With removing that 4-foot strip of concrete and asphalt along the road frontage on Hamilton and Okemos roads, where we kind of have that zero setback streetscape. What I see that we're going to plant mulch and whatnot, but should construction not ensue next year as planned, what is our plan to block all that surface concrete and asphalt that needs to be maintained until true construction can occur due to the environmental contamination in the plume?
Well, the developer has been maintaining a maintenance program and keeping weed control down and mowing and so forth. And they've been doing that quite well from what I understand. And some of the residents have actually, when we've been out there, thanked us. And even though we're not the ones cutting the lawn and doing all that, have thanked us for keeping it maintained. So first and foremost, that will continue. Secondly, that greenscape that we have there is just to green the street front. It's a temporary thing until we go to construction. And I think what you're getting at, trustee, is that in the event the development doesn't begin as planned, we have the whole COVID thing and financing and alike. We, and I can talk, and Will Randall is on the phone. I don't know if he's able to speak, but we could do some improved greening, maybe shrubbery and bushes or, of that nature in that green space. That is a possibility. But we want to limit whatever we do because it's going to be there for a very, very short period of time. That's the plan. And, you know, why spend money if we're going to be ripping it out? But I'm sure they would be open in the event that things got delayed further to break up that facade, so to speak, of a flat site in asphalt.
Yeah, and I don't want any money to be, you know, invested in something that is truly temporary, but, you know, like we've had conversations as we've gone through this process. If, you know, during the process of this demolition, you know, it's looking like the financing is not going to be in place for next year, then I think it becomes something that the community would really like to see, just to at least beautify it. You know, it's one thing if we're looking at construction midsummer next year. It's another thing if we're looking at construction midsummer 2022, right?
Understood, totally understood. I will work with Will Randall and we'll get back with you. We do have some agreements and some other documents that we're going to ultimately need the Brownfield Authority to approve, and maybe we can work something out with the Brownfield Authority Board and to address that.
Then I just want to thank Mr. Randall for getting the cement barricades moved. Those were, of course, inherited from prior ownership, but I do really appreciate that. And, you know, it took a little bit of time, but it certainly has made a big difference in addition to the weed control on the asphalt. But please just continue to be mindful of the site conditions, and I appreciate the forward steps that have been made. I'm comfortable with approving this tonight and comfortable with the associated costs. It's something at the very least for the community. We'll create a pad-ready site minus, I guess that would lead me to ask one more question. Would there be any additional excavation that's needed after this for the plumes, Mr. Helzer?
Yes, there will be. There will be additional. There is some limited remediation that's going to occur in the south block up by Bottoms Up. We do have soils that will be coming out, continue to come out in the hazardous area or for the former dry cleaner site, as well as cut and fill operations. Most of that soil is going to be going off to a landfill. We are not putting an underground parking structure, as most everybody knows. The structure will be contained in the center of the building. It's going to be a small ramp, speed ramp, but in the middle of the block on block 2. But with all of that work and the stormwater work and so forth we have to do, there still is a significant amount of environmental we have to accomplish. Not the massive amount that we needed to do when we had underground parking, but still a fair amount for a site like this.
Yeah, so I'll revise my remarks. It moves us meaningfully toward pad ready, but certainly not pad ready given the extent of the plume. So
there's audio coming in somewhere here. Did other people hear that? It's interfering.
No.
Okay, I'm hearing audio. It's coming through. Somebody says audio in their background.
I have no.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Helzer. I will be voting yes on this, and I'll turn it over to the rest of the board.
The other board members, I want to mention though very quickly, I want to also thank Mr. Randall for putting those signs up. We got a lot less questions from our citizens when those signs went up saying that something's coming, that something's happening. They realized it was not an abandoned situation. And getting the for sale sign, which was long overdue to come down. Those are small things, but they're important in a community like this. Any other points or questions, discussion before I ask mine? Okay, I will notice that I think the schedule, Mr. Hauser, that you talked about, I think I found it here, and it talks about complete hazardous materials demolition assessment on October 23, and then it's got moving on to October 26th, et cetera, et cetera. Is that the schedule you're referring to?
That is the schedule that we can. I don't see that delaying overall with the status of where Eagle is at. I think the delay in action and going to the first board meeting in November is not is not going to change things a whole lot. I think we'll still have iron on site in December, but we will update the schedule, and if you don't mind, we can get back with you before your next meeting on this.
Before you do that, let me ask Mr. Kieselbach, is it required that there be another meeting, or if someone wanted to move this up for action today, is that going to be legal from our point of view?
No, you could act tonight if you chose to.
So there's another thought. If board members are interested, we could suspend the rules and act tonight if you're comfortable. It would take though to do that. Mr. Opser.
We'll move to suspend our rules so that we can take this under consideration this evening.
Is there a second?
Support.
Any need for discussion on that, or we're just ready to vote on whether or not we're going to take it up tonight? Okay, let's have a vote on whether we take this up tonight. A yes vote means we will for action. It's a motion to take it up, to suspend the rules and take it up tonight for action.
I want to comment.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Dreyfus.
Generally, I've been opposed to this because we could do this with almost anything that comes before us and decide, we should just kind of move more quickly on things. Because the idea is that we always have to have the public have a chance to listen and respond, because it's the first time they get to hear this. So for us to act takes away the opportunity for other stakeholders to comment in this 2-week period. So I don't think it does government transparency a good favor when we act the same night, unless it's an emergency. Usually it's due to a deadline imposed by another agency for a grant. That's one of the main reasons we would want to do something exactly that night. But I would suggest that we don't do this right now, and we just come back in 2 weeks. It's not a disaster if you wait 2 weeks to be able to do this.
Well, part of that schedule I was referring to has the grant being approved by Eagle on November 6th, and we're meeting November 5 for our next meeting because of the election. So my concern was that maybe this was going to create a problem. I'm not sure Mr. Helzer confirmed that, though. It sounded like maybe it isn't a problem. So before we vote, is it necessary that we do this? Replying to what the clerk has raised, Mr. Helzer.
In all honesty, I don't think it's going to hold us up. We would send a good message to Eagle, but I believe we have them on board.
I agree with that. This is Will. Sorry.
You agree with what, Will? Be specific.
I agree with what Eric's saying, that we will do our best to move forward regardless whether you can act tonight or you need to wait 2 weeks. We can keep the program on schedule.
Okay. All right, then let's vote on whether or not we're going to proceed tonight. A yes vote means we proceed tonight.
I didn't get who the second is. Opsimer made the motion for that. Who's the second?
It was DeShane, although Trustee Wazinski tried to get in, but DeShane beat her to the point.
Okay. Okay, so I take the roll call right now?
Yes, this is on whether or not it's action tonight or just discussion.
Okay, Treasurer.
Yes moves to to action.
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer.
Yes.
Trustee Sunland.
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Supervisor Stika.
Yes.
And Clerk Dreyfus votes no. Motion passes to 5-1.
Okay. So now it's an action item instead of just discussion, and so we need a motion. Mr. Opser.
I move to approve the Village of Okemiss's application to the Meridian Development Fund as presented in the packet.
There's supported by Wazinski. Further comment, Mr. Opser?
Yeah, I just want to note that this has been an ongoing discussion with the applicant and Eagle since the early part of the summer. Some of this originated with conversations that I had with Supervisor Stika, but I also brought some concerns that I had to Manager Walsh at the time, and it ended up being the process that we used for the demolition that has occurred and will tentatively continue to occur for some of the dwellings and structures up at Walnut Hills. But at the time, I brought that public act to the manager and our legal team for this site in particular. And it was noted to us by our attorneys that we really didn't have any legal recourse under the state act. However, it did become something that was useful up at Walnut Hills. But then in conversation with the developer, you know, we started from a standpoint of them asking us to front 50% of the cost, and it would only be on the bottoms up block. It would not address any of the environmental or demolition needs on the block to the north where the old Tuba Museum and other structures are. So we've kind of expanded, at least we've doubled the footprint, not quite doubled the scope of work, and come out at roughly a third of the cost, a little bit less than a third of the cost that we were originally talking about, which I was not in any way, shape or form in favor of, but I'm going to be voting yes tonight because this has been a long deliberative process, and the community, even if this leads to nothing in terms of redevelopment, the community is getting a lot of work done, about 10 times the work done at a cost that we would otherwise absorb 100% at a later date. So when you get a deal like that, we've got to take it because we very well could be in a situation in the future where we're left to our own devices, because unless people start breaking in to these dwelling units like we've had at Walnut Hills, breaking the windows out and basically making them a non-secure structure, we have no legal recourse whatsoever on whoever the property owner is. And it's very inconceivable that that is all of a sudden going to become an issue on the site when it's been vacant for quite some time. So we really do have a good deal before us. And the reality is that Eagle, you know, I respect Eric Helzer's opinion on this because I know he works with them a lot, but I think it does behoove the township to make sure that our application or our approval is more than 24 hours before they're making considerations on state funds that could go somewhere else. Thank you.
Treasurer DeShane.
Would reiterate what Trustee Oppenheimer has said. This is a good deal for the township. This is a lot less than we were expecting to have to take from our fund to do the demolition and asbestos removal. I also agree with the clerk's statement that we do have a process that allows for public input, and we should, whenever possible, honor that. We've had a number of citizens speaking during our public meeting on this, and there was some opposition to it. I would be much more inclined to say we should wait the 2 weeks to allow for more of that. Haven't heard none. And also the fact that this has been a discussion item before this board throughout this year. This is no secret that we have been talking about spending some of our redevelopment fund to eliminate the blight that's there. So it's been a often discussed item. This should be no surprise to anyone who follows township government. Now, township and government in general can act slow. It can act, and it does act slow on purpose at times. Other times, it's important to act with speed and alacrity, and I think this is one of those times. I agree that it would be better to get the word to Eagle earlier rather than later that the township is going to kick in its share for this, and we're anxious and ready for this work to be done.
Ms. Wazinski.
Thank you. I would just, after review the proposal, I am also in support of the current proposal. I do respect the clerk's, you know, point of giving the public an opportunity to have input. I will say that all of the input that I've received is, why aren't we moving forward? And we've had so many roadblocks in this particular project, well before I was even a board member, that, you know, and with COVID now, I just think it's really important that we move forward, and we move forward before construction season. So I also am full support of moving on tonight.
Clerk Travis. Muted. You're muted, clerk.
I have a question about the project itself. There was about a month or so or two ago, there was some notification from the developer that there was going to be a change in the proposal in terms of the amount of commercial space was going to be reduced, the amount of residential increase because of they thought that would make it a more palatable loan structure for some financing was what I was reading into that. Has the proposal changed from when the board had approved it? That's my question. Mark, can anybody answer? Has the proposal changed from when the board knew what we had voted on when we approved moving forward with the project?
The applicant is going to file for an amendment to that mixed-use plan unit development approval. Based on the discussion we have, it looks like it will be a minor amendment, which could be done by the director. They are proposing a reduction in the amount of commercial space and taking that space and converting it to residential units. They've not officially applied yet for that amendment.
Right. I think it's pretty, I mean, it's supposed to be, it goes from like 11,000 to 7, something like, it's a pretty substantial drop from the small amount that was there. I mean, we're down to about the space for just a couple of spaces for the entire commercial, like maybe, 1, 2 or 3 small places, perhaps. Hard to say with what commercial could fit. To me, the proposal that we've been supporting all along is becoming almost a pure residential, residential apartment complex. It's a little bit surprising to see that we had a small amount of commercial and even that's being whittled away. And this is our commercial core area and it's turning into basically an apartment building. So I have a hard time about supporting in general, giving the money for this project, which is not what we were originally thinking. We originally wanted a real mixed use. This is a residential project. That's what it is. And we don't know, again, what the future is holding with the other phases. If it's the same thing's going to occur. So we have a high density and bringing a lot of traffic and people to downtown Okemos without bringing the type of commercial mix that we want. And we're willing to give money to keep supporting that. So there is positive support, but I don't think people know what they're getting. I think citizens are going to be quite surprised if they find what they find in terms of the commercial side or the lack thereof when it comes to fruition.
Right. I have a couple comments and go on to ask other people. First, with regard to public input, I understand totally what the clerk was saying earlier about public input. However, this is not a situation where anybody is being surprised. We've talked about this many times. It's been on our agenda in various fashions for many, many times over the course of a year at least. Plus, we had a public hearing today that was well noticed. We did not have it. People did not come forward and talk during the public hearing. I think that the public is informed. The public had expressed through other means, through communications to us at various times, individually and as a board, that they want action here. I don't want to have this held up in terms of any state money. The developer has really come up with a good plan that causes the demolition, which is right now the big problem. I mean, yes, we want the buildings. We want them, whether they're residential, commercial, or combination. We want something there. But right now, what we've got is a mess. We've got buildings that are unoccupied, falling apart, paint coming off, looking horrible. And the project, what we're talking about tonight is not the whole project, not how much commercial space versus residential. That's later. What we're talking about tonight is the demolition aspect and whether we're going to contribute to that demolition, which is a standalone thing in a lot of ways. The rest of it can't go forward without it, but in a lot of ways, it's a standalone thing. Talking about only giving a small portion now instead of the whole demolition costs. Originally, we were thinking of demolishing it ourselves and spending several $100,000, $300,000 or $400,000. Instead, we're looking at maybe 80-some thousand going towards a much bigger demolition, which includes both blocks, not one. And I certainly am in agreement with moving forward and voting yes on this tonight. We had hands. Mr. Manager Walsh.
Yeah, I just want to make a correction on when we start talking about commercial space. I would have expected the director to get into this. The commercial space was 52,000. It's down to 26, if I recall correctly. And correct me if I'm wrong, anyone on the screen, because these are just numbers. And also out of that 26, Douglas J is going to take approximately 10,000 of that. That's the plan, to keep them downtown. So it is a major coup to keep them in downtown Okemos. And also, I can tell you one thing, there's some preliminary studies going on across the state of Michigan with COVID and commercial space. And there's a lot of communities that are going to be devastated when this COVID thing ends with commercial space. And the last thing we really need is a lot of additional commercial space in this community. So it is going down, but it's not going down to 9 or 11,000. It's going down to 26,000. And another thing that's really important, again, that I wish would have came out from our department, is that the overall space, the overall footprint of this building is being reduced. So when we look at this amendment to this building, it's not increasing the development at all. I just wanted to bring that out so that everyone has the same facts, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone.
Mr. Ashmore, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just also wanted to note, Manager Walsh kind of made reference to it, but with the COVID situation and with the situation with how precarious commercial space is in terms of valuation and an investment strategy, I mean, for this project, we're looking at private investors. We're not looking at traditional lenders like banks and credit unions and our traditional financial institutions. So if the community wants to understand how precarious of a situation we're in to realize any redevelopment during the COVID era, which has no end in sight, and of course, it's going to take time to rebound and come out of it until traditional financial institutions want to lend in such risky businesses like commercial space. You know, that's where we're at. So what we're doing tonight is trying to take a step forward and actually realize at least 90% of the project that we had originally improved. And ground floor real estate can always be retrofitted. It's, you know, it's 2x4s and drywall. That's it. Thank you.
Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. 26,000 is not the number we had hoped for initially, but it's something. And I think it's worth relaying the story that the manager shared with us, some of the staff, of conversation Wayfair. Wayfair was going to bring several hundred jobs to Meridian Township, and the Hagedorn, we called to see where that project was, and told us that the project is canceled. They would not be bringing those jobs here. Those employees are doing the same customer service work out of their homes. And in fact, they weren't even in the corporate office anymore. So that space is available in case you wanted to rent some corporate space from them. Not only they're not coming to Meridian Township, but their space is now. The world has changed in a radical way in the past 6 months, and will continue to change. And for those communities that have a lot of commercial space, a lot of office space, they're going to have much harder decisions than our decision in this redeveloped area. It's sad. We miss our downtown feel. We miss walking store to store to commercial areas. Sadly, that is a dream that will not likely come back in our lifetimes because the American consumer has changed. Now, we may get some interesting salons like WSJ. We may get some interesting boutiques there. Retail itself is gone and not coming back anytime soon. So we be adaptable. And as Trustee Oppenheimer pointed out, this is still a project that isn't easily funded. And Mr. Randall has been very creative in looking for private investors to push this forward. And we're grateful that he and his primary investor, Mr. Smith, continuing to do that. It will mostly be housing. It will be a smaller project. As the supervisor pointed out, we've got blight there. We've really ugly four corners, and that does not fit the character and the confidence and the style of this township. And something has to change. And so it's time to take that change, make that change. We're doing what we can to make it happen. Yeah, we're losing commercial space, but we're still keeping some commercial space. To me, that's the victory here. Thank you.
All right, are we ready to have a vote on this now? Clerk Traffus. You're muted, Clerk Traffus.
Supervisor Stika.
Yes.
Clerk Traffus votes no. Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Oppenheimer.
Yes.
Trustee Sunland.
Yes.
And Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1.
Thank you. We now move on to discussion item 13B, Walnut Hills update, and I'll call in Manager Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just real briefly, before I get into that, I want to thank Director Clark. We didn't hear from her during that whole discussion on the redevelopment fund, but she did a lot of work on this, and I don't want it to go unnoticed or unappreciated. So thank you, Director Clark, for that. Walnut Hills, 2 weeks ago, the board directed staff to give a 2-week hiatus to moving forward with the demolition of the clubhouse because a family had come along that wished to purchase the property. I've had many conversations with the family over the last 2 weeks, as of the latest being at 5:15 this evening. It's pretty apparent that through their due diligence that they are not going to be able to resurrect the clubhouse. It just is too much, and although they want to maintain some of the holdings inside the building for nostalgic reasons, they're not going to be able to use it in the same manner that they plan to. So that leaves us tonight with what to do. We're recommending, because the last thing we want to do is get involved in between Summer Park Realty, who owns the property, and the family who's looking to purchase it, and this demolition issue. And it's my understanding that the family has until November 6th to make a decision on how they want, if they're going to close on the property. I would ask that the board, and I don't know if Mr. Menser, who's been intimately involved in this project, whether he feels differently or not, or has a different perspective, or anyone else, but what I think makes sense tonight is that, because if we go out and we hire Michigan Demolition to demolish, raise the building, it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to do that, because they have to go through the state for asbestos and other things. So I think what would make sense is that we wait until November 6th, when their opportunity to move forward with the potential purchase of the property, let them figure it out. Let's not get involved in the middle of them. And then on November 6th, we can give notice to Michigan Demolition right now, hey, get it done so you can move forward on November 10th or 11th and move forward to demolish it. But I just think it behooves us not to do anything before November 6th that would in any way appear to be in conflict with their ability to fairly negotiate who's going to do what at this point. So that's where we're at. They can't use the clubhouse. They have until November 6th to sign this agreement with Summer Park Realty. And I think we ought to just stall for a couple weeks and give them a chance to work it out. That's where we're at. I'd be happy to answer any questions, that I know Mr. Menser would as well.
Trustee Opsimer.
Yes, so a question for Senator Menser or Manager Walsh. With the estimates that we've received for demolition, in the interim, could we at least run those by at least the family, so that they could take a look at them? Because if they do believe that they are, reasonable estimates that we've procured, then that would allow us to move forward on a quicker timeline on the clubhouse once any of this is resolved. I suppose showing them to Summer Park Realty should be would be good too, but if it ends up being that the property isn't sold, it might be that we have to just go forward and put a lien on the property. But if we could do some due diligence there, just so that we don't end up kind of in a reset mode where they're given, another 35 or 45 days to go get bids and just begin process of even talking about demolition. I just want to try to avoid that if we can.
Yeah, and we've supplied the family with a lot of documents, and Mr. Menser has, and one of those documents is the bid that we have from Michigan Demolition.
Okay. If we could just inquire with them whenever we inquire next, on what their thoughts are on that, and if they think it's a fair bid, or if they'd like to hear more bids, assuming they do purchase, just so we don't end up in another prolonged issue with the site.
And in fairness, I did talk, and the supervisor is aware of this. Today we had a conversation about this. In fairness, I have talked to both sides today. I talked to Summer Park Realty and I talked to the family, because the last thing I want to do is have us put in the middle of this.
Yeah, just knowing that since I agree. We don't want to just move forward and do it and put a tax lien on, because then we're locking in that cost. That's why I really think we just need both parties to examine it, determine it fair cost, and if we procure a good bid, so that they can act expeditiously whenever they reach an agreement, and whichever party has to make that execution. But I mean, we're at the point now where we know with absolute certainty that the clubhouse is not even worth saving. Before that was a question mark. Now it's not even a question mark. So it's not only a nuisance, but there's actually no value in saving.
Okay. Treasurer DeShane.
Yeah, I think the manager's advice here is the solid advice that we should avoid taking a drastic step of spending $300,000 for demolition, which then has to be repaid through a lien. The only reason that I would hesitate to do that is if there was a real greater public safety risk or threat had risen since then. So I'll just ask Chief Plaga if there's been an uptick of any kind. Has the environment there remained the same since we last discussed this?
Well, what I would say is that the environments remained relatively the same. Many of the buildings have been removed, changes in weather and responsibility. So we have not had what we had during warmer weather times, or when all those buildings were out there and were not secured.
Got you. Thank you. That's my concern.
At this point, what we're looking for is just general direction to the manager for him to direct staff. He's asking for our input. And unless I hear strongly otherwise, I think the input is that his suggestion that November 6th be the new deadline, so to speak, unofficial, whatever you want to call it, deadline is what we're saying to the manager as he requested. Anybody objecting or raising any issues? Okay, do you have what you need, Mr. Walsh? Shaking his head yes. Okay, all right. On to our next item, which is the social districts.
Good evening, trustees. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, in the new position. So Peter and I worked very heavily on social districts. They were established this year in July, regulated by Michigan Department of Licensing, Regulatory Affairs, LARA, and the Liquor Control Commission. They have established for businesses that are qualified and carry basically any sort of alcoholic beverage licensing, qualified licensors can apply for a social district permit. And that means that they would be allowed to serve or allow any of their staff to serve outside of their physical building. The districts for a community to establish a district itself, so this comes back to the governing local unit body, they have to establish and designate the areas. They must be areas where at least 2 qualified licensees holders are immediately adjacent and contiguous to another public area where that could be considered the commons area. So there's 2 things kind of going on here. One is that the permit allows for the license holders to serve people outside of their physical space, which what we see is traditional. But the other part is for the local unit of government to designate where these areas are. There are a lot of rules, including, signage, enforcement, maintenance plans, branding, establishing specific cups, establishing specific stickers, one for each qualified license holder that has a permit as well. I reached out so there are currently only, as of today, 17 communities that have a social district in the state. And of those 17, 15 are cities. There are only 2 villages that have this. All of these locations have very robust downtowns or large areas where bars and restaurants are contiguous to each other. I reached out to the city of Grand Rapids because they have, you know, a very robust social district that are kind of parceled all over the community. I was trying to find something that maybe would be a good fit for our suburban layout. And I talked to the director, Luke Canfield, and he let me know that it might be a challenge considering how our businesses and establishments are laid out, that they were doing some pretty creative designations of areas, but a lot of the areas were public spaces, that they were using alleys, that they were using right-of-way areas that the city of Grand Rapids owns to permit this as a common area. And you have to have a common area in order to have this function appropriately. So after I reached out to Grand Rapids, I also worked with Peter. He reached out to Kalamazoo. And Kalamazoo's got a very good, robust downtown. Their establishments are very much the same. My recommendation right now is for us to find some possible alternatives. Laura did establish a different permitting options for bars and restaurants to be able to do outdoor seating. That might be an option, but the way I'm looking at how our community is laid out and where our establishments are, there aren't two that are immediately adjacent, contiguous to a public space that we would be able to set up a maintenance plan and designate signs and rope off the area for these common areas.
Let me try to understand more fully what these are. Right now, if I have a restaurant, can I have a seating area immediately outside of my restaurant where I can serve my customers? And if so, can I also serve them beer or wine, whatever, with their dinner?
Not with the social district permit.
No, I mean, right now.
Right
Forget
now.
about this.
Yes, right now, an establishment could get an additional permit that allows them to do outdoor service
Okay,
on their property.
right. Okay, so it has to be on their property. So it can't be like on part of the public sidewalk. It has to be totally on their property.
Yes.
You're saying yes, okay. So what the purpose of the social district is to expand that to a bigger space? Is that basically it? So that it can be beyond just whatever piece of property they own?
Yes, the purpose of the social districts is to allow multiple businesses that were meeting basically COVID capacity constraints and those restrictions to be able to serve their customers without having to turn anyone away or make them wait for a long time. They could use this large common area. So if I were to give an example, if we used the watershed and Mayfair, if they were immediately adjacent to a public park, then Meridian Township could establish a commons area in that park, and both the watershed and Mayfair could have their staff serve. People could go into their establishments, get food and drink, take it to the commons area, eat, and sit there in a socially distanced environment.
So just by the nature of where all of our bars and restaurants are, with the exception maybe of the Mayfair and we don't really have a lot that are next to each other, let alone next to a public space.
Yeah, that's the other key, is that it has to be adjacent to a public space. So even if they are next to each other and the use of their parking lot would not be acceptable.
So we may have sent you on a task to study something that ends up not really helping our township, or at least our township businesses. Okay, all right. Anyone else? Mr. Opsimer.
This is actually a question for Principal Planner Munzer. Peter, we are still allowing, under our existing ordinance, we are allowing businesses greater flexibility still in creating outdoor patios using their private parking lots, correct?
Yeah, we've had a lot of success with that program so far. So we started off right away when businesses started to reopen and we all came back to work. Individual businesses, they can have outdoor seating areas to serve drinks. They do have to get a permit. There's a temporary and permanent permit through MLCC. but we've had a lot of businesses take advantage of that. And right now we're actually working with a lot of them to keep the areas sustainable for the wintertime. So they're talking about putting sides up or possibly adding heating elements to some of those areas. So we're working with Tavis, the fire inspector, and our fire department on solutions for different solutions for different locations.
Yeah, I was actually just in Rochester Hills a few days ago, and Chomp, one of their downtown restaurants, they have an outdoor patio area, but it's really just like the structure that's on it. In the summertime, it's just your basic timber structure. Like somebody could replicate it pretty cheaply and easily, and it has like corrugated plastic for the ceiling, and they just put up visqueen wrap and stuff on the sides, and then brought in the outdoor heaters. So, and they were able to keep it with a big opening still in the outdoor patio structure. They were able to keep it fairly well heated. I don't know if it'll work through the winter. It might depend on the temperature on a given day, but I would certainly encourage Director Clark and Director Kieselbach and yourself to work with our businesses to create greater flexibility. Lord knows we do not, even in good times, we don't need all the parking we have. Now we certainly don't. So we should put it to good use and maybe even encourage businesses to partner on these, especially given some of the costs with making them usable in the fall and certain points in the winter and early spring.
Yeah, we will do that. Thank you. And our businesses are definitely very creative in finding ways to serve their customers during these times.
Sure.
Yes, Director Clark, I'm glad you brought this to us, and I don't think we should necessarily dismiss it. I like the idea of continuing to pursue it and present it as a palette, if you will, to our business owners to see what they can make of this. Maybe there are opportunities out there we're not aware of. We're not likely to do that this winter. Certainly by spring, they might have this opportunity. We do have a lot of natural areas in this township, and perhaps for a business to maybe do even new development closer to some of our public areas because of this new initiative. So I hope you would reach out to members of MAVA and other business organizations to get feedback from them and to see what kind of potential is there. There is a real dearth of restaurants in this township, and we need to take whatever advantage we can find to encourage them to develop and to be creative. And overlay in all of that right now is COVID, which is not going away. And we're discussing COVID just as intensely, I think, a year from now as we are today. So this is something that's here to stay for years at least. So we need to be as flexible, allow our businesses to be as flexible as possible.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Blazinski.
Quick question for Director Clark. Is there any, so initially I was thinking the same as you. We really, our township isn't set up with a downtown per se, where there's a lot of opportunity for this. But I hear what Treasurer Deshane's saying. Is there any disadvantage to pursuing this potentially and asking our actual, business owners, or is there any other than your time?
No, there's no harm in asking the business owners, their perception on the extension. I think my concerns come down to, are we meeting the legislative requirements? So when Peter and I looked over it, or excuse me, when Principal Mesner and I looked over it, we couldn't find a common area that the township has control over that we could designate any of these local businesses to. So they have to be immediately contiguously, so adjacent. So they have to have property that lies touching this common area. And that is the area that the township would designate. It's not that two businesses have to be together. So I actually reached out to Laura specifically and talked to Sarah Weber at the department and asked her specifically, could we just use the parking spaces behind 2 of these establishments. Would that be okay? And she said, according to the act, no, it's not. And that we should probably consider looking at some other creative options outside of the social districts. But there isn't any harm in talking to the businesses to see if they would be interested now.
If I might, I concur completely with Director Clark. You know, we've looked at this quite a bit. I think it's a tool we keep in our back pocket for when opportunities arise, as long as the state continues to offer it. For now, it might not fit into any particular situation that we've got. We can keep pushing the outdoor seating and just look for opportunities when they come up.
And it does sound like it's a long time away, but according to this act, unless the state makes it permanent, it sunsets in 2024.
Great, thank you both.
Okay, I think we've talked this through, and we really appreciate the efforts that Director Clark and Principal Planner Metzger put into this, and the other staff. I'm sure there was a lot of work, and sad that we don't have the opportunity right now, at least to take advantage, but thank you for your efforts in looking into it, finding out. We're now going to move on to the Grettenberger Drain and Meyer Drain improvements, and I know we have our director countywide, Patrick Lindeman here, and Carla Close, one of his deputies, and we'll turn this over to Mr. Perry. Would that be the right person?
Please, I appreciate it, Supervisor Stika, members of the board. Again, appreciate Drain Commissioner Lindeman, Deputy Drain Commissioner Close attending tonight. Stephen, if you could promote also Alan Boyer of LSG Engineering. He'll be integral in providing basically a summary report too. Appreciate that, Stephen. So the board's aware in the spring of 2019, we executed a 434 agreement with the Union County Drain Commissioner's Office to study the flooding that frequently occurs on Grand River and Okemos Road. Also, there's been some flooding across from Playmakers for the last several years, and that was an area that we had some concerns about. And really what was driving some of this was the MDOT improvements that were planned for Grand River. We really felt all as agencies now was a time to do a study on that to find out what would be the comprehensive fix for that. And that's why we moved forward with that 434 agreement. So tonight, the Drain Office is going to present their findings of that, and then we can discuss really what is the plan of action going forward and how we can do a comprehensive fix for that issue on Grand River. I'll turn it over to the Drain Office.
Good evening. Pat?
I'm here.
Okay.
All right. Well, the Grettenberger and the Meyer Drain. The Grettenberger is it predates 1913. Our original documents on it were started in 1913, but it was many, many years before that when that drain was actually put in. It's undersized and it's in really bad shape. We've done some maintenance on certain parts of it, and it's just crushed and fallen apart. The Meyer drain is 1974 vintage, and none of them can carry the volume of water necessary to prevent the flooding, even in minor storm events on Grand River, the intersection of Grand River and Okemos. And the Highway Department is, in fact, going to rebuild Grand River, and it seems like a very good time to partner with the Highway Department and Meridian Township and try to fix all the problems associated with this particular drain. We have Carla Close as one of my deputies, and Alan Boyer and Doug Kelly is a drain attorney. He's also here tonight. And Derek Perry, I can't thank him enough for all the work he's put into working with my staff and, getting this thing to move forward. So the only way that we can actually fix this, and I'm going to let Alan Boyer explain it, but the only legal way that we can go about fixing this is with petition. So I think that that's the resolution that's in front of you. Now, whether you consider it tonight or you think about it after a couple weeks and then vote on it, that's up to you. But that is the only way that we can actually move forward with this. And we would like to get all the plans worked out prior to the starting of the highway. So if I could ask Alan Boyer to describe what's going on here at this intersection.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Lindeman. I'm going to share my screen here so that you all can see this presentation. What we've prepared is a brief PowerPoint presentation to give you a summary of the hydraulic study that we did for both the township and the Drain Commissioner's office. This was done by agreement with the township, and that agreement is in your packet, and as is the study. There's also been various discussions between township staff, drain office staff, the road department staff at the county, and of course MDOT staff regarding this. And so I'm going to briefly run through the report here and give you a little background about what Commissioner Lindeman was talking about. This is the study area that we looked at, and I've got my cursor going on the screen here so you can see the area that we're talking about briefly. This is taken from the Meridian Township drain map that the drain office has. This is Okemos Road here running north and south with the dog leg. This is Grand River Avenue, M43, as it passes through the commercial district in the township. This angled road here is Marsh Road coming down to Hamilton. Of course, we've got the Meridian Mall here. We've got the former Kmart, now Best Buy here. This is Myers. And certainly this map also shows the Red Cedar River, which is an important part of the discussion here as it meanders south of Hamilton. The village of Okemos and the 4 blocks here were a subject of your earlier discussion this evening. The lines on this map, the blue lines, represent established county drains. The solid lines are open channel drains, and the dashed lines are enclosed pipes that are below the streets. And so you can tell from this map that there is quite a network of drains that are included in this area. And this is in general the area that we studied for the hydraulic study and the report. One of the things that's not shown on this map, but you will see it later on, is that MDOT has a storm drain that runs right down through Grand River, passes through Marsh Road, through Okemos Road, and it enters the river at this location down near Namoka, or Nakoma Street, or Short Street, I think it's referred to in some instances. But that drain is not a county drain. It is solely operated by MDOT, and that drain does provide some drainage for the roadway. The study looked at a variety of things, and this was basically intended as the outcome of the study. And it was really all about the outlets for the storm drain systems in the whole area. We looked at the possibility of being able to alleviate some flooding during the 10-year flood event. And certainly you would recognize from the previous map that all of the drainage in this particular study area all connects to the Red Cedar River. And that's important because the river becomes a limiting factor to how the system functions. The other thing we looked at was related to simply trying to relieve flooding during the 10-year rainfall event, which is a typical design event. And we looked at specifically 2 instances, the Grettenberger drain, as Pat mentioned, and the Myers drain, because they are directly related to proposed and pending road improvements both on Okemos Road and Grand River Avenue. And with that in mind, we were also able to look at the fact that with drainage improvements and being able to improve how the drainage system functions, we also made a recommendation that it's entirely possible to be able to raise Okemos Road at Grand River, that intersection, and a portion of Grand River in front of Nakoma Street, so that by raising those streets, we could improve a public safety issue where those intersections would typically flood, we could raise the street so that wouldn't happen. I will talk specifically about the two drains that Pat mentioned, the Grettenberger drain and the Meyer drain, because those are both critical to the road improvements that are being proposed. The pictures that you see on your screen were taken in August of 2018, at which point in time the Grettenberger drain failed. These are videos taken from inside the pipe. There's a large void here in the lower picture that was below Okemos Road. And in the upper two pictures, you can see the condition of the pipe. As Pat pointed out, this was constructed about or before 1913. It's only a 10-inch pipe, and certainly these pictures show that it has failed. These two pictures indicate the void that was under the road and certainly the repair that was made. The repair was with a 10-inch plastic pipe connecting to an existing 10-inch tile. The study has made it very clear that for the drainage to serve the road properly, this should be a 24-inch pipe. And certainly the road department has delayed improvements to Okemos Road simply because they understand that the drainage is inadequate, and it's likely that the drain should be replaced and improved before the road improvements go on top of it. These two pictures provide us with a little bit of background related to the flooding that occurs in the intersections. The lower left-hand picture is the Okemos Road Grand River intersection, and the right-hand picture is the Nakoma Street Grand River intersection. These two intersections flood both as a result of a backup in the Red Cedar River, but they also exhibit flooding characteristics when we get a short duration, high intensity rainfall that the storm drainage system cannot handle. And so although this particular set of pictures indicates flooding due to the river, there is flooding that looks very similar to this due to the inadequacies of the drains. In this lower picture here, you see Okemos Road and Grand River flooded. The Meyer drain crosses approximately at this location under Grand River, and the Grettenberger crosses at this location on the center of Okemos Road. Both of those drains pass over the top of the MDOT storm drain system that runs down the middle of the road. And one of the reasons they're able to pass over the top is because through this intersection going from east to west on Grand River, MDOT constructed an inverted siphon so that the drainage systems simply do not connect. And so that is important to understand in terms of the study. That's a very inefficient system, and in fact, it contributes in part to the flooding. And so we've made certain recommendations related to that as they relate to both the Grettenberger and the Meyer drain. That MDOT drain or storm drain does come down to about this location where it turns and then connects to the river. And it does contribute to some of the flooding that occurs on Grand River Avenue. These are the flooding hotspots that occurred in February 2018 as a result of the river backup, but these are also specifically at Okemos and Grand River and at Nakoma and Grand River are areas that flood that do present a public safety issue when we get the short duration, high intensity rainfalls. This particular slide shows the study area that we've looked at here and has an overlay showing the 100-year floodplain from the Red Cedar River. And so you can see that the floodplain does certainly cross Grand River at Nakoma Street and at Okemos Road at those two intersections. What we're suggesting is, and I'll mention this here briefly in a minute, is that the green line, which is the MDOT storm drain system, if it becomes interconnected with the Grettenberger and the Meyer drains, would help improve the drainage such that, along with the possibility of raising Grand River at these two locations approximately 2 feet, that the flooding would be alleviated to some extent, and that the public safety for vehicles traveling along the M route, M43, would have a much better way of getting through those intersections during minor flooding events. This drawing shows the locations where we are proposing those raisings to occur, again at Nakoma Street and again at the Okemos Grand River intersection. And certainly that is why we are approaching these two particular drains as part of the study and bringing those to you highlighted tonight as part of this presentation. This is the Meyer drain here, passes in front of the Meyer store, crosses Grand River, and runs up to the Okemos drain. The Grettenberger drain connects here to the Meyer, and then the green line is the MDOT storm drain that at this point is not a county drain, and it's not connected to any of these other county drains. So to summarize, the preliminary hydraulic study took a look at trying to improve and reduce the incidence of flooding that is occurring in the core area as it passes, by the mall and along Grand River and through the Okemos Road intersection. The idea being to reduce the incidence of flooding, but also be prepared for the pending road improvements along Grand River and Okemos Road. Those are two critical things related to these two specific drains. And certainly taking a holistic approach to the drainage system seems to make more sense in terms of the long-term improvement to the road system, so that we've proposed the drainage system replacement and improvement, and that drainage system replacement and improvement is the subject of both the resolution and the petitions for the Grettenberger and Myers drain. That concludes my comment.
Thank you, Alan. Are there any questions at this time?
Board members, don't be shy.
It's a lot of water.
Yeah.
Not quite deep enough to float a canoe. Well, maybe it could float a canoe in it. I don't know. But it's not a safe situation. And these are minor floods. Sometimes when it's gets a little bit more water, these can be quite deep, and they're just impassable. So, and given the age of both of the drains, they have to sometime in the near future be replaced at some point with the new system. In coordinating it with the road work, it just makes sense. It's just going to be a lot less hassle trying to dig everything up. We certainly can't let the road work take place and then go back in and dig it up. So we'd like to dig it up first and do whatever's necessary to improve the drainage. Both drains are undersized and need to be increased in size. When they were first put in 1913, the Grettenberger handled a lot of vacant land. All of that is now developed and subdivision up into it, parking lots stub into it, and so on and so forth. Anyway, that weren't there before. So it definitely needs to be upsized.
Commissioner Lindeman, do we have any idea? I mean, the Department of Transportation has given us lots of dates and delayed them on Grand River. Do we have any idea of any study at all on Grand River Avenue when they're going to do it?
No, I do not.
I was gonna say, I can actually speak to that if you don't mind.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Yep. So they're in their design phase, and again, we haven't been doing this in a vacuum. We've been working with the drain office, the county road department, and they're looking to let this basically put it out to bid in July, the summer of 21, and actually then proceed with construction in 22. So that's kind of why this is before you tonight, because the drain office needs these petitions, underway so that they can do their work, so that we can bring this all together in a nice nice bow here and be ready to move with the MDOT construction.
Treasurer DeShane?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Lindeman and Carl, for your help with our marketplace in the green project, which had some flooding issues, and I understand you were very helpful with our staff in getting those resolved in a fashion that couldn't take much longer, but you were very good and easy to work with, and we thank you for that. Regarding the proposal here, how much of Grand River would we be raising 2 feet? Is there an estimate of how long the span would that would impact, and what would the impact be on businesses or fronting in that part of the river?
You're asking me that question? This is Pat.
Or Alan.
Or Alan. Alan probably could answer it better, but I'm not quite sure that we understand completely.
Whoever
Raising
can answer
that
it.
2 feet would I'm not quite sure what the impact would be raising the road up. Raising the road up is certainly one of the options. And in terms of the drainage, it would certainly help the drainage if we could work with the highway department to perhaps even get rid of some of this water through their pipe. And maybe some of their pipe needs to be increased in size. They would pay for it, of course. And eliminating the siphon drain underneath that intersection would be extremely helpful.
And a follow-up question, I understand that the flooding is caused by the fact that our drains are actually reversing at some point. Red Cedar is pushing water through the drain up to our surface drains. And so is there additional carrying capacity for the Red Cedar if these drains are reconfigured? And if so, do we know how that would impact our homeowners living along the Red Cedar already reporting flooding or frequent flooding?
I can't give you, go ahead.
I can answer that question, Treasurer DeShane. To take your question kind of in 2 parts in reverse order, improving the carrying capacity of the drains would not really affect the floodplain elevation that's associated to the river. You know, they get the water to the river, and generally the areas that are draining to those drains are a small enough area that water gets through the drains, hits the river, and that water is moved downstream. It's the water that's coming from upstream in the river that, as the river raises, it backs up through the drains and affects the floodplain. And so, you know, improving the carrying capacity of the drains really doesn't affect the flooding that's related to the river. It certainly makes a difference in terms of the carrying capacity of the drains and reducing the flooding that's associated with rainfall. And that's important to keep in mind. The other thing that's related to that, and this goes back to your earlier question related to MDOT, MDOT has been taking a look at the effects of what raising the road intersections would do to the businesses. And in some cases, particularly adjacent to Okemos Road, it would actually improve their driveways, because several of those driveways are quite steep as they come down to Grand River. And so bringing Grand River up would tend to flatten those driveways and make them more negotiable. MDOT is also aware of the fact that if we do raise the intersections, or they do raise the intersections, that does have an effect on the flood storage volume in the Red Cedar River, because in fact raising the road would require fill of the floodplain. And so we've already taken a look at the fact that there would be the need for a compensating cut in order so that there is no net loss of floodplain and we're not creating a harmful backwater to the residents and the businesses. And certainly Director Perry and your engineer Yanis Izradi have been very helpful in providing us with information that we have passed on to MDOT, particularly related to some township property that may very well be available for building that compensating cut, and that looks promising to MDOT. So certainly there are some permitting issues there, but MDOT's whole approach to this is if they can improve the public safety aspect of the road without creating any harmful impact to any of the area businesses or residents, that's the approach that they will take.
Right. Thank you for that. And one last question regarding the 100-year floodplain map. Are we far enough along in climate change path that we can expect that the 100-year floodplain we're going to be seeing every 10 years? And it seems that, you know, every year it's hotter than the year before. So do we really need to re-estimate how often we're going to see a 100-year flood here in Meridian?
Well, the way that a 100-year flood works, it's called a 100-year reoccurring flood. It doesn't occur once every 100 years. It could happen 5 times in 1 year. It's 1% of the amount of water that is accumulated 1% of the time over a period of 100 years. So you could have, in theory, 500-year storms in one summer. We have seen an increase in the amount of the storm volumes over the last 15 years, certainly, and you can attribute that to global warming and a variety of other that natural phenomena that's happened. But I can tell you that 2-inch storms make up 96% of all the storms in Ingham County. It's a 2-inch rain. If you raise the Grand River and Okemos Road at those intersections, and you will avoid almost all of those 96% storm events. There is an occasion where you might wind up getting 4 inches in 5 or 6 hours. We've seen that at least 2 or 3 times a year. Delhi Township seems to get it, get hammered by 4 inches of rain. And we've worked with them to get the impact of that. And with the mitigation that we're going to try to do here, we are going to reduce the recurrence of flooding, the small amount of flooding that happens because of the storm. When the river overflows and actually dumps water back up into the drains, all bets are off. I mean, that's just going to happen. And certainly, if you can raise Grand River upward, you're going to have continued traffic for fire, ambulance service, and all the rest of the public safety necessities. But you're not going to avoid the reoccurrence of a 100-year storm. And you'll probably see closer to 60, 50-year storms more often than not throughout the next 10 to 20 years, the way the trends are moving right now. I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you very much.
If I could add, Treasurer DeShane, in our work group meetings, we have already begun discussion amongst the agencies about starting a scoping process whereby we need to get out and have public meetings, knock on all the doors, make sure that people are aware of the options, and discuss with the businesses that are along the corridor that could be affected, as well as the residential neighborhoods. It'll be a huge process, which is another reason for starting, the urgency for starting, because there's so much planning involved, because there is going to be some disruption, just like at Jolly and Okemos Road when that intersection was raised, which I think everybody agrees has been a resounding success. But there was a lot of discussion with businesses and easements that need to be acquired, and there's a lot involved in a process like this. It's, beyond just Alan and the other engineers' work on the design plans and the size of the pipe and the elevations. There's the public outreach and the business, and so starting early gives us the time to bring everybody and get their input, bring them in, get their input, make sure that people are involved, that we can minimize the disruption to the greatest extent possible, would be the goal here. So another reason for starting early, and we've certainly, Deputy Township Manager Perry has been at the forefront of making sure that the Okemos and Grand River corridor businesses and neighborhoods are very much involved in the process.
Clerk Traffus.
Can you just clarify a little bit about the impact on the mitigation that would occur again in the behind the south of the fire station? What would it do? Would it damage or destroy most of the trees that might be there due to heavier water flow in that area? I know it's already wetland to some extent.
Yeah, you're talking about north of Grand River?
Yes.
Yeah, that the mall, of course, is almost 100% impervious, and that dumps through that wetland. There's the Okemos, I believe it's called the Okemos drain that runs through there. That also runs through the neighborhood across the street. And there are parts of that neighborhood that are in 1975, we had a 40-year storm and 40-year flood. And at one of the intersections in that neighborhood, it was 9 feet deep. So that can tell you what a 100-year storm would look like. It'll give you some sense of it anyway. And that comes from all of those buildings to the east of Marsh Road. All of their parking lots come through the same Okemos drain and through that neighborhood. This part of the water that dumps into the Okemos drain, which all of this water from that intersection right now go to the north and dump into the Okemos drain. If we can divert some of that through the highway drain, it would alleviate some of that, but certainly not take it away. Those trees back there are used to flooding, and they've really they can handle it quite well. They've, you know, for the last 40 or 50 years, there's been a lot of floods on Okemos Road, and it's all due to the increased imperviousness that's taken place. And the fact that we weren't very smart when we built some of these subdivisions. We built them right into low spots. It's just the way it is. So, does that help?
Yep.
Anyone else have questions or issues they want to raise? Well, Derek and Pat, I think there's a big project looming here. Hopefully we can get everything through in a proper form. Anything more you want to comment on, Derek?
Yeah, I just one final comment. I just, send appreciation to the Michigan Department of Transportation and their team. This original project was just going to be a resurfacing along Grand River. When we brought some of these flooding concerns to them, and they were able to pump the brakes a little bit, find some additional funding to maybe, resolve some of these longer-term issues. So I just, again, a lot of times you hear how MDOT's not responsive to communities' needs, and this is 180 on that. They were very responsive, and we appreciate them being a strong part of the project.
Anything else from the Drain Commission?
No, just that we're willing to move forward as fast as we can so that we're prepared when the Highway Department, Ingham County Road Department is ready to do its work with the surfacing of the road. We certainly want to have the drain work done. If we're going to do it, we should do it before they resurface and rebuild the roads.
It's not germane, but it's interesting. I had a good friend of mine that I worked with who owned a house in Ottawa Hills, which is the neighborhood you referenced, north of Grand River. He was on the north side back at 75, and I helped him with the cleanup when the water went halfway up his first floor. So it was a mess.
It was a mess, and that was only a 40-year storm.
Yeah.
You can imagine what a 100-year storm will do.
Yeah. Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll have this on for action next time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you, Carla, for coming out. Good to see you. And Mr. Boyer, good to see you. Thank you all. And thank you, Derek and staff. Okay, we now come to comments from the public, second round. Mr. Geebies.
course, we still have the telephone number if people need to dial in, 517-349-1232. And we can, of course, promote or enable anyone in the attendee area to speak. We already have one person who's raised their hand. Lewis family can go ahead. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Again, Robin Lewis, 2295 Barnesbury Road, East Lansing. Just want to say thank you for the support for my application for appointment represent Meridian Township to the CATA board. I look forward to meeting each of you and working for the citizens of Meridian Township. My longstanding experience and experience of my family and numerous friends give me an insight for the need of reliable transportation to get to work or fun, school, doctor appointments, etc. Again, I will bring the vast knowledge and my desire to serve that I have obtained over the years to this appointment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other people wishing to speak at this time?
And I am seeing no other raised hands at this time, sir.
Okay, if that's the situation, we'll move on to other matters, and I have a couple of them before we move on to asking all of you for other matters. One is we need to set a meeting for a meeting date for our goal setting. We usually do that around, or should do it in December or around December. And looking at the calendar, Mr. Walsh and I come up with a couple of possibilities. One is actually November 23rd. That's the Monday of Thanksgiving week. And the other one is December 15th, because right now we're meeting on the 1st and the 8th of December because we were trying to avoid getting too close to the major holiday there. So I would ask for general input before we decide. We don't need to necessarily take a vote or anything. We just need to have a good input, and I can call for the meeting on those 2 days. Looking for input, whether November 23rd or December 15th works better. I have asked Ms. Jackson, she can make either one, the 15th. I asked Ms. Guthrie, she prefers November 23rd. So at this point, I've got one each way. Mr. Opsimer, then Mr. Duchesne.
I'm good with either. I'm perhaps better with November, just so we can also get the manager review moving as well, perhaps.
Okay. Good idea. Mr. Duchesne.
I kind of like the December date, because we're in such a fluid environment. Getting closer to 2021 might make it easier to set goals for 2021. Either date works for me as well. My initial preference is for the December date.
Okay, so now I got 2 and 2. All right. Anyone else? What comment on the 2 days? First, can you make both? That's the first question first. Are both of those dates good for you? Because if they're totally out, I need to know that. I think my screen froze. I'm not sure why it chose to do that now. I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't see anybody or hear anybody. Ms. Wazinski, you're back. Can you have a comment?
I just say both dates work for me, so no help to you, sorry.
How about Ms. Sutherland?
I think I prefer the 23rd.
Okay. All right. I will probably end up calling for the 23rd. So it's not getting, it seems to be pretty much evenly divided, and I end up breaking the tie. So for now, pencil in the 23rd. I know Mr. Dreyfus is not coming because he doesn't really care which way we go on this one. Okay. The other thing I wanted to bring up is we had some interesting news. You know, the DISH organization rates school districts, communities, and other things, and they have been rating our public schools in Michigan now for at least, gosh, going back to when I was on the board for a long time. And once again, Meridian Township is home to some of the best school districts in the state. They rated Okemos number 4 in the state, East Lansing number 21, and Hazlet number 31. And that's out of 575 districts. So that tells you the kind of quality that we have here in Okemos. Why are you chuckling? Could I not be heard?
Your coming across loud and clear to me, sir.
Okay. Other board members, comments? Shane.
You know, one of the great things about working at town hall, seeing our great dedicated staff every day doing for the residents, but we also get to see our volunteers who are out helping out. The lunch yesterday, and I came across our Meridian, Georgia Staika, I believe, is still the president of, and they were installing a plaque for Helen Canner, recently passed away, the founder of the club. With your permission, I could share just a couple of pictures from that plaque and from those volunteers yesterday.
It's more than the plaque. Her ashes are there.
So there we go. So they're there for them. I don't know who these four fine women are. They were out there in 35-degree weather or 40-degree weather, planting moms and planting the plaque there for Helen Tanner. And of course, we have beautiful gardens all through the township, and all of them are maintained by our garden club, and particularly the ones around Township Hall. And so they're out there doing great work again. And here is the plaque that they put there for Helen Tanner. It was, of course, the late wife of Howard Tanner, another resident who is well renowned throughout the country for introducing the salmon to the Great Lakes. So the Tanner family has made a great contribution to the township, and the garden club has recognized Helen's efforts here with so just wanted to share that with everyone.
Mr. Tanner has given substantial sums to both the garden club and other programs of the township, very generously in honor and in memory of his dear wife. And it's truly appreciated, including paying for what you saw there in terms of the stuff, the plaque, and a burial place there. Okay. Anyone else? If not, we need a motion to adjourn. Nobody wants to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Support.
Moved by Osterberg, supported by Wazinski. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Put your hand up. Yeah, okay, all right, good, we're adjourned.